Orders of the day.
Orders of the day. Government orders, government bills, commons. Resuming consideration at second reading of Bill C-69, an act to enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulatory Act, and to amend the Navigation Protection Act and to make consequential amendments to other acts.
Resuming debate. Reprise du débat. The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I will be happily splitting my time with the honourable member of Saanich Gulf Islands. It is an absolute great honour for me to rise in this House and speak on behalf of the residents of Davenport on Bill C-69, which has quite a long name, but I'm going to list it. It's entitled An Act to Enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator Act to amend the Navigation Protection Act and to make consequential amendments to other acts. Mr. Speaker, Davenport residents deeply care about the environment. They care about how we develop projects in this country that impact our environment. They care about how the Canadian government will be adhering to our Paris Accord commitments, and they've been very much asking me to show them the plan on how Canada will be achieving its targets, and I will be showing that to them very shortly. And as well, in Davenport, we are doing our own bit, Mr. Speaker, in terms of trying to find ways to model a low carbon urban sustainable community. But back to C-69, Mr. Speaker, I am so pleased to have this opportunity to address this House regarding a legislative initiative that is at the heart of our priorities as a government, that is to ensure a sustainable future for Canadians. Our guiding principle is that a strong economy and a clean environment go hand in hand. We believe that we can harness our natural resources to create good jobs while fulfilling our duty as stewards of the environment. Bill C-69 introduces a review process that for major projects will strike a balance of protecting our environment while ensuring that good projects can get built and create jobs for the middle class. And essentially, Mr. Speaker, what C-69 does is to create a single agency called the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada that will lead all impact assessments for major projects to ensure a consistent and efficient approach. And in fact, this Impact Assessment Agency of Canada will ensure that there are better rules in place that will protect our environment, our fish and our waterways, that will rebuild public trust and respect Indigenous rights, and that will strengthen our economy. And let me sort of spend the next few minutes, Mr. Speaker, telling you about how that will do so. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have to go back a little bit in time. The fact is that many Canadians no longer had faith in our previous environmental review process following changes introduced by the former government. That is why we made a promise to Canadians that we would review and modernize environmental assessment and regulatory processes. I am so proud to say that we are delivering on the promise by bringing in better rules that will restore environmental protections and rebuild public trust in decisions about major projects. Building on what works, we have designed an assessment system that is clearer and more predictable and that allows good projects to go ahead sustainably. Now, Mr. Speaker, as you know, we are a government that consults broadly, and the proposed Impact Assessment Act was not arrived at in isolation. It is the result of careful examination and extensive consultations with Canadians. More than 2 years ago, our government launched a comprehensive review of federal environmental assessment and regulatory processes. This comprised of 4 separate but complementary reviews. We looked at ways to improve federal environmental assessments, to modernize the National Energy Board, and to restore loss protections and introduce modern safeguards under the Fisheries Act and the Navigation Protection Act. To that end, our government set up a 4-person expert panel to solicit the views of Canadians from across the country. We also established a multi-interest advisory committee to support this work. The expert panel went to 21 cities, Mr. Speaker, received more than 800 online and written submissions, and welcomed over 1,000 people at engagement sessions. We had extensive consultations with Indigenous peoples, and we heard from the province and territories, industry, environmental groups, and the public. And we also took into account input from 3 other processes led by another expert panel and 2 parliamentary standing committees. We then prepared a discussion paper on the government's proposed path forward and solicited feedback. So what did we hear, Mr. Speaker? We heard environmental groups, Indigenous leaders, provinces and territories, businesses, and Canadians from communities across our country who told us that effective assessment must not only focus on avoiding negative impacts, but must foster sustainability. Stakeholders told us that there was a need for greater transparency and that assessments must demonstrate how public input informs decision-making. Project reviews must be grounded in scientific evidence as well as Indigenous traditional knowledge. Indigenous people want to participate as partners in the economic development of their territories. We heard that Canadians want to be more involved in our processes. Businesses need clearer and more predictable timelines, and decisions should be more open and evidence-based. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, let there be no doubt that the residents of Davenport also contributed their thoughts to the consultation process. They felt that the previous assessment process wasn't a good one, that there was not enough consultation with communities and Indigenous groups, that there wasn't enough being done to protect nature, and in general that we needed stronger and fairer environmental assessment laws. And I'm so happy to say that this is what the new legislation incorporates and reflects, not only the views of Davenport residents, but all Canadians who participated in the process. And what we are proposing is a system that's more transparent, effective, and efficient for all concerned. I'd like to now highlight some of the principles that form the basis of Bill 69. First, we are adopting a broader approach based on the principles of sustainability. Canada has had a law in place since 1992 to ensure that the environment is taken into account as projects are considered for design and implementation. When first introduced, environmental assessment laws and regulatory processes had a specific focus on environmental impacts. Our thinking has greatly evolved since then, and we now understand that an assessment system must consider more than just the environment. It must take into account the wider concerns, including the economic, social, and health consequences associated with proposed projects. And Mr. Speaker, the new Act does just that, and that's why the name of the Act has changed from the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act to the Impact Assessment Act, reflecting a much wider range of effects that we consider as we review the projects for implementation and aim to foster sustainability. Second, the new processes will be more efficient and more predictable. It will allow everyone to know where they stand. Projects will now go through an early planning and engagement phase where potential impacts are identified and discussed with the public, Indigenous people, and the project proponent at the onset of the initiative. Timelines will continue to be legislated, efficiencies gained through early planning that will align for timelines of other phases to be reduced, leading to more timely decisions. Third, we want to establish a new partnership with Indigenous people. They are the most affected by the impacts of the projects, and we will ensure that we respect their rights and jurisdiction in the way that decisions are being considered. Fourth, we want evidence to guide and inform all our decisions, and so we will consider evidence of science as well as Indigenous traditional knowledge as we move forward on these projects. The value of Indigenous traditional knowledge cannot be underestimated, and we are determined to include them in every single project moving forward. Fifth, we want to increase transparency, and by transparency we mean openness, Mr. Speaker, that translates into removing barriers to public participation in the review process and making key project information openly available. Finally, we want to take a truly big picture view of impacts, one that improves our understanding of the cumulative effects of all projects in a given region. The new impact assessment will take this wider view through increased use of regional assessments. Regional assessments examine the effects of past, present, and future activities within a region. And for instance, they might examine effects on biodiversity and species at risk, and identify impacts on the rights and interests of Indigenous people. They will provide decision makers with a fuller and more complete picture of the context within which a project is proposed, allowing for a better understanding of the overall impact of the assessment. Mr. Speaker, these are not mere operational changes that we have introduced, but rather fundamental changes to the way that we actually do business. I'm very proud to be in this House speaking on behalf of C69. I believe that we have a wonderful new process in place, and I have a lot of confidence in the projects moving forward. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the residents of Davenport.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for Peace River, Westlock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, yesterday at the Northern and Aboriginal Affairs Committee, we had natural resources there, and we asked them about how we're currently studying at that committee. We're studying C262, the implementation of UNDRIP, and how all of Canadian law is going to have to live within the framework of UNDRIP. And so we asked the natural resources officials that were there if they had considered if this current bill, C69, lived within that framework, and had they considered that, and they had not. That was their answer. And so I'm just wondering if free, prior, and informed consent is to be held at all levels, particularly legislative, but also at this. Does this current member think that the C69 does meet that threshold of free, prior, and informed consent? Thank you.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for his question. At the very base of this act is the understanding and the recognition and the respect of Indigenous rights, and I think that is consistent of what UNDRIP is about. The Act requires involvement of Indigenous peoples throughout the assessment and based on the recognition and respect of their Indigenous rights, as well as it provides for cooperation with Indigenous jurisdictions undertaking their own assessments. So I have full confidence that there is enough not only consultation with Indigenous communities right across this country, but very much valuing and respecting their rights and recognizing that as so. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Questions and comments. The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to ask through you to the member opposite, we have here before us a 341-page omnibus bill. It's the biggest bill to come before this Parliament in years or maybe decades on environmental protections. And the government moves closure after 2 hours of debate. The NDP has only had 2 speakers on this bill and may not get another one. I'm just wondering what she can say to that she's going on about how important this bill is, and yet we're not able to debate this bill here in this House at all fully.
The member for Davenport.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his excellent question. I don't agree with the premise that it's an omnibus bill. I think it's a very comprehensive bill because it's actually changing a number of acts. It's changing the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act, it's changing the National Energy Board Act, it's changing the Navigation Protection Act, and a number of other acts that are consequential to it. So it's very comprehensive. It needs to be comprehensive. I will say to you, Mr. Speaker, we've spent 2 years consulting on this. Once it moves from this House, there's a number of other opportunities for members of all parties in this House to be able to input into this at committee, and it comes back to this House. So there's a number of other opportunities for members to be able to input into this bill. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Comments? The honourable member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington. A very short question, short answer, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, the member just spoke about the consultation process that our government has gone through. Maybe she could expand upon that consultation process, how extensive it was. Thank you.
The honourable member for Davenport.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker. As I mentioned earlier, and I thank the honourable member for his great question, I would say that we've spent a couple of years on this consultation process, and it was actually comprised of 4 complementary reviews. We were extraordinarily comprehensive. Not only did we go across the country, we also made sure to actually get comments online. And I know that the residents of Davenport definitely participated in it. There was a number of letters that they sent in, a number of messages that they sent through me, right through to the minister to actually input into this. And so I feel I have a lot of confidence in the consultation process. And I have a lot of confidence that we took into account what we heard and we crafted the very best bill based on those consultations. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today on the traditional territory of the Algonquin peoples, unceded, and thank them for their generosity. Miigwech. I also want to thank the honourable member for Davenport for splitting time with me. I need to say that the circumstances are not those that lend me to feel particularly relieved or happy, but I am grateful for the civility of giving me 10 minutes, because otherwise I would not be able to speak at all because of the egregious use of time allocation on an omnibus bill. I never expected to see this after the change in government, that we'd see omnibus bills with time allocation. This is 3 bills put together. The National Energy Board Act changed, the Navigable Waters Protection Act changed, and the Environmental Assessment Act overhauled. The 4th piece that had been running along in tandem through the great good judgment of the Minister of Fisheries is Bill C-68. It stands on its own, and it's an excellent piece of legislation. But with the time available to me, Mr. Speaker, I'm only going to be able to speak to the impact assessment piece of this omnibus bill, which I'm afraid falls below any standard of acceptability and should trouble deeply any Liberal who stood in this place and voted against Bill C-38 in the spring of 2012. Every single Liberal MP, every single New Democrat, we stood together against the destruction of these acts so that we now have a repackaged version of those same principles of eroding environmental assessment is something that caucus should try to figure out, but I hope it will lead to changes in committee. So at the time available to me, Mr. Speaker, I'll quickly review my background in environmental law. I happen to be an environmental lawyer. It's by even weirder fluke that when I was 22 years old and a waitress and cook, I participated in the very first environmental assessment panel hearing in Canadian history in 1976. It was in Cape Breton. It was the Wreck Cove hydroelectric plant. I've participated in dozens and dozens since. 10 years after that, I was in the Minister of Environment's office. I was actually the person as senior policy advisor who took the quest from Environment Canada, from a wonderful senior civil servant named Ray Robinson, who headed the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency in those days. We took to Privy Council office the request to legislate, because up till then we'd been operating under a guidelines order that required environmental reviews, but was a bit uncertain in its full rubric. Some people thought it was a guideline, so therefore it wasn't binding. We got permission to legislate. Subsequently, I resigned my job with the Minister of Environment when the Minister violated the environmental assessment review process guidelines in approving dams without permits. This is just to say that I didn't come upon only recently my commitment to proper and thorough environmental assessment in Canada. It's nonpartisan. It goes back decades. Now, what happened under Bill C-38 was the destruction, the repeal of our environmental assessment process, and the replacement with a rather bogus process. So the question before us now, we can compare this Bill C-69 to the bogus process in C-38 in 2012, or we can compare it to what's needed. It's all well and good for the federal Liberals to say to us today, we did a lot of consultation. It's true. There were 21 cities with public hearings and over 1,000 people showed up to a superb expert panel on environmental assessment. The question before us today is, why were their recommendations ignored? I'm going to read the recommendations that were ignored one at a time. There are many. But in previous debate in this place, when the bill was first put forward, the parliamentary secretary to the Minister of Environment claimed that I was wrong in my assertion, which I think is fact, that the environmental assessment expert panel was ignored. It's really important to understand the point of environmental assessment. So I'll just go back a bit and say that's one of the pieces of Harper think that has survived into Liberal think. Environmental assessment has never been about a green light, red light, yes, no, the project goes ahead or it doesn't. It's primarily a tool for good planning. In the entire history from 1976 to 2012, when Harper repealed the Act, in that whole history, only 2 projects were ever given a red light. I say that again, from 1976 till 2012, with the thousands of environmental reviews that were done, only twice did a federal provincial environmental review panel say this project is so damaging it can't be mitigated, we must say no. It's primarily been about studying a process thoroughly, studying a project thoroughly, deciding we can mitigate the damage if only the proponent would agree to better scrubbers, if only the proponent would change the location slightly, if only, and in the course of the review process, many projects were improved. The damages mitigated and reduced, and in the end, a much better project was accepted. This has never been primarily about how to get to yes or no faster. That's what Harper thought, and apparently that thought process has somehow infested some ongoing decision-making process within government. So environmental assessment is about good planning. The Environmental Assessment Act, up until 2012, said the purpose was to get in and review a project as, quote, as early in the planning process as possible and before irrevocable decisions are made. So let me just quote from what we heard from the expert panel for what environmental assessment should contain. And they did agree that it should be called impact assessment. That is one piece, you could claim that. Page 5, quote, the Impact Assessment Authority should be established as a quasi-judicial tribunal empowered to undertake a full range of facilitation and dispute resolution processes, unquote. This has been ignored. The panel, your expert panel that you send around the country, you've heard about them, 1,000 people participated, 800 submissions. Their recommendation to government was don't have ad hoc panels where you pull people on different projects, always having different panels. Develop expertise through a quasi-judicial tribunal. Ironically, this was also the advice from the Red Book Liberal Platform of 1993. Second point, have time limits and cost controls that reflect the specific circumstances of each project, not the current one-size-fits-all approach. That was an innovation under C-38. They go on to, this is a key point, projects need to be reviewed whether they're big or small. The effect of Bill C-38 that Harper brought in, the previous era had seen approximately 4,000 projects a year reviewed, most of them with paper screening exercises that didn't take much time. After C-38, it shrunk to fewer than 100 a year. 4,000 a year, fewer than 100 a year. The Liberals have gone with perpetuating the fewer than 100 a year. This is how they've done it, by ignoring this advice. The panel says federal interests, when you should have a review, include, quote, at a minimum, federal lands, federal funding, and federal government as a proponent, as well as, and then they list species at risk, fish, marine plants, migratory birds, indigenous issues, and so on. At a minimum, this piece of legislation ignores anything except a project list. That was an innovation of C-38. No law list reviews requiring that if the Navigable Waters Act or the Fisheries Act requires a permit from the minister, there be a review. No requirement that when federal money is spent, there be a review. That's the advice you got from your expert panel, ignored. They also said clearly from the expert panel that there should be no role at all for the National Energy Board, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, or the offshore petroleum boards. And they point out the federal system prior to 2012, quote, had decades of experience with delegating final decision-making to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the NEB, unquote, without those agencies meddling in the environmental assessment. What's happening under C-69 is like a shell game. We're told it's one agency, independent, except when it's reviewing pipelines, the panel must be comprised of people who are sitting members of the NEB, now called the Canadian Energy Regulator. If they're reviewing offshore petroleum operations in Atlantic Canada, the panel members must come from the offshore petroleum boards, which by legislation are required to expand offshore oil. It's an embedded conflict of interest in the legislation. And the atrocities continue, Mr. Speaker. Indigenous rights. How is it that the Minister of Fisheries can put before us Bill C-68, which has strong language to protect Indigenous rights? C-68 at Section 2.3, Rights of Indigenous Peoples, makes it clear the Act cannot derogate from Indigenous rights. 2.4 says it's the duty of the Minister, when making a decision, to consider adverse effects on rights of Indigenous peoples. This piece of over-discretionary political masquerading of environmental assessment of C-69 merely says the impact that a designated project may have on any Indigenous group. is a factor to be considered. I can tell you as a former litigator, the courts do not regard Indigenous rights as a factor to be considered as protecting Indigenous rights. This bill gets an F. Please, in committee, let's at least get it to a C+.
Questions and comments? Questions et commentaires. The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't question the member's passion on the topic. In fact, her history, she's well illustrated, just to what degree she's been involved on this particular file. But having said that, I think that there is an expectation that the government have a process in place which incorporates legislation that recognizes that there is an Indigenous factor, a environmental factor, and a energy to market factor that has to be taken into consideration in terms of what the needs of Canada are going forward. And would she not, at the very least, look in terms of, we have, on the one hand, the Conservatives saying we've gone too far. We have the NDP and the leader of the Green Party saying we haven't gone far enough. At the very least, let's allow the bill to go to committee. I understand her concerns in regards to speeding this thing through. I can assure her that if it were up to some members of this House, this legislation would never pass the House. So unfortunately, at times, through time allocation, it's a tool that we require. The question I have for her is, would she not agree that at least it is a step forward? Maybe not the leap she would like to see, but it is a step forward.
For Saanich Gulf Islands.
Mr. Speaker, and to my honourable friend, Parliamentary Secretary, Leader in the House, my commentary is not based on what I'd like to see as an environmental activist. It's a public policy question of, is it good legislation? It is, objectively speaking, not good legislation. It is so wide open to discretion that although one might say, well, look at our current Minister of Environment, one can't imagine her ignoring Indigenous rights and ploughing something through. But legislation is for all time, for different governments. And even if I thought that there was no chance in a million years of any misuse of discretion in the current government, why would I sign off on a piece of legislation that is so, empirically speaking, deficient? It is not good legislation.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Edmonton Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I listened to the speech of the honourable member. She's definitely very experienced on green and energy and environment in general. And she mentioned the pipelines. She mentioned the balance, the Indigenous community. How does she envision a pipeline going anywhere west or east in Canada with the balance to get the pipeline going through? Where does she see the balance in order to get pipelines through Canada, either to the west coast or to the east coast?
Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
I thank my honourable colleague from Edmonton Manning. I think it's a question of looking at the evidence, having a full, impartial hearing where witnesses can be cross-examined, assertions can be tested, the truth can be determined. In the case of pipelines, I'm not against any particular pipeline. The question is always, what's in it? If it's a pipeline with bitumen and diluent, it can't be cleaned up. Should you wish to build a pipeline to bring more BC wine to Alberta, I'm all for it.
Questions and comments? We have time for a brief question with a brief response. The honourable member for Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Distracted about the idea of a pipeline filled with great BC wine, as much as Canadians would probably like to see that happen. My question is very simply for my friend, both on process and on the substance. Liberals promised not to bring in omnibus legislation. The Speaker of the House has determined that to be this. After 2 hours of debate, Liberals brought in time allocation, shutting off the conversation when they promised that they wouldn't do this. And on the substance, and I suppose we need to bring this into the real world, and here's my question for my friend. The Prime Minister, when campaigning for the job, said that the Kinder Morgan pipeline, for example, had been put under a bad review, and that he would put it under a proper review. If the Prime Minister had done his job and actually subjected that project, the diluted bitumen project planned to go to Vancouver, with the Premier of our province, British Columbia, having to be doing the makeup work after the fact, after the approval process, to find out things like how does one handle a spill of diluted bitumen, either in fresh or salt water. that if the Prime Minister had followed through on his commitment to have good legislation go through decent process, that projects would be reviewed properly, would we be in the circumstance that we're in with the conflict with First Nations people and the people of British Columbia and now the Government of Canada?
For Saanich Gulf Island, and 30 seconds or less, please.
Well, the honourable member for Skeena-Bulkley Valley is absolutely right. The question he suggests to me suggests its own answer, which is that, of course, had we not been put through a process that is not part of that history of environmental review that I reviewed, the National Energy Board had no expertise in doing reviews, and this allows me to mention another carryover bad aspect of C38 into C69, and that's the time limits that were put in C38 is how it was that the National Energy Board determined they would not allow people like me as an intervener to cross-examine Kinder Morgan's witnesses, which led to abuse of process and not really getting to the facts of the matter. That aspect of time limits has not only been continued in C69, the time limits have been shortened.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to speak on Bill C-69, a massive 400-page omnibus bill. Now, Canadians will remember during the last election when the Prime Minister put his hand over his heart and made the solemn declaration to Canadians that he would never, ever, ever introduce anything resembling an omnibus bill. And yet, here we are, yet again, with another omnibus bill from this government. And it gets even worse, Mr. Speaker, because this government has seen fit to invoke time allocation after 2 hours of debate. Time allocation after just 2 hours of debate on a bill that is a massive bill, that is a complex bill, that is going to rewrite the environmental assessment process, that is going to have a profound impact on jobs and the economy. Mr. Speaker, I say shame on this government for doing that. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to devote my time, and I should say I'm going to be splitting my time, Mr. Speaker, to clarify, but in the short time that I have, I'm going to be focusing on Part 2 of Bill C-69, this massive omnibus bill. Part 2 establishes a new approval process for energy projects, including pipelines. It is going to have a profound impact upon my province of Alberta and thousands of my constituents who live in St. Albert and Northwest Edmonton, whose jobs are tied directly or indirectly to the energy sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Minister of the Environment, in speaking on Bill C-69 in this House, said that the objectives of Bill C-69 include improving public confidence in the approval process and strengthening investor confidence and making the energy sector more competitive, growing the Canadian economy and creating good middle-class jobs. That's what the minister said, and Mr. Speaker, who could disagree with those objectives? Those are laudable objectives. The only problem, Mr. Speaker, is that Bill C-69 will achieve none of those objectives. Rather, what Bill C-69 means is it means keeping energy in the ground. That's what Bill C-69 means, and I know that for the Prime Minister's principal secretary and chief political strategist, Gerald Butts, keeping Canadian energy in the ground is something that he has long fantasized about. Mr. Speaker, what Bill C-69 means is gutting an assessment process based upon science and evidence that balanced environmental and economic issues with a assessment process that is politicized from top to bottom. How is the process politicized from top to bottom? Well, Mr. Speaker, let's start with who gets to appear and make submissions to the regulator. Who has standing, Mr. Speaker? Presently, in order to have standing before the National Energy Board, one must be impacted directly by a project, or one must have relevant knowledge or information about a project. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-69 eliminates that criteria and replaces it with any member of the general public. What this means, Mr. Speaker, is that it is open season. It is an invitation to Gerald Butts' friends and the Minister of Environment's friends and the radical anti-oil sands movement to take over the process, to control the process with their ideological and political agenda to shut down Alberta's oil sands. A movement that is funded by U.S. money, filled with activists who are, in many cases, nothing more than shills for foreign interests, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of the Environment says that that is going to restore public confidence in the assessment process. Mr. Speaker, what it's going to do is completely politicize the process, and it's going to result in delay in terms of the approval of projects. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of the Environment says in terms of delay, don't worry about delay. Don't worry about delay because Bill C-69 is going to streamline the approval process, but it's going to reduce the time to see major projects approved. Except when the Minister makes that assertion, she is conveniently overlooking the fact that Bill C-69 imposes, before the assessment process begins, a planning process. A planning process that is a 6-month process, 180 days, and when that is taken into account, it will not reduce the time, it will add about 100 days to the time in which a project could be approved. Now, Mr. Speaker, if all we were talking about was an additional 100 days, we probably wouldn't be having this debate. But, Mr. Speaker, it gets worse because the Minister, on the basis of a political whim influenced by George Soros-funded activists, can extend the timeline. She can extend the delay. But, Mr. Speaker, it even gets worse than that, because the Minister can kill the project at the planning stage before any scientific analysis is done, before any environmental analysis is done, before any economic analysis is done. In other words, the Minister can kill a pipeline project purely on the basis of a raw political decision. And the Minister says that this is going to increase investor confidence. Is that some kind of a joke, Mr. Speaker? It's not going to increase investor confidence. It's going to do the opposite. It's going to drive billions of dollars of investment south of the border and to other energy-producing jurisdictions that are allowing their energy sectors to grow and thrive. Mr. Speaker, make no mistake about it. If Bill C-69 is passed, not one major energy project will be approved in this country. Mr. Speaker, before another major pipeline project is killed, it's imperative that this Parliament kill Bill C-69.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank the honourable colleague across the way for his speech. I find it interesting that the NDP, in their speeches, the government's not doing enough, and the Conservatives, the government is doing too much. So that tells me that we found the right kind of balance in this bill. But it's really rich to hear from the other side who gutted environmental regulation, who had gutted the staff of environment and climate change. I guess the question I have for the other member is, has there ever been an environmental regulation that he actually liked?
In Albert and Edmonton.
Well, Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, the assessment process under the previous Conservative government was among the strongest in the world, and that was widely recognized. What our previous Conservative government did in 2012 was we streamlined the process. We streamlined the process to increase investor confidence, to increase investment in the energy sector without in any way diminishing environmental standards. And, Mr. Speaker, that was a very successful process, unlike what we have seen over the last 2 years, where we have seen billions of dollars of investment driven out of the energy sector. In fact, there has been the largest drop in investment in the energy sector over the last 2 years under this government's watch than Canada has seen in 70 years. That's the record of this government.
Questions and comments. Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Trois.
The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. In the previous legislature, when the Conservatives changed the Navigable Waters Protection Act to become the Navigation Protection Act, I was a fierce opponent of this approach. In that approach, there was the idea that about 100 lakes and rivers would be protected and identified in an annex of the Act. What we're seeing now is that the Liberals are bringing back the title Protection of Navigable Waters, and they're keeping the Conservative approach. Does my colleague agree that when it comes to their approach, it seems like false advertising? It seems like a trademark of the Liberals, that they lead people to believe one thing that the bill does not actually deliver.
I agree with the honourable member for Trois-Rivières' comment that the Liberals like to say one thing to appeal to their base and then almost always do quite another. And Mr. Speaker, with respect to the Navigable Waters Act and changes that are provided for in Bill C-69, I would say that I do have concerns with those measures, perhaps not necessarily the same concerns that the honourable member for Trois-Rivières has, but the bottom line is what the changes that are being brought forward in Bill C-69 with respect to navigable waters means is that it's going to make it more difficult. There are going to be more roadblocks and more impediments to getting critical infrastructure built.
Questions and comments. We have time for a very brief question, brief reply. The honourable member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the Liberals like to put out lofty promises and words, and they went to the UN and proudly declared they were going to implement the UN Declaration, which really required certain things of them. And I would like to ask my colleague if he sees any evidence of that commitment that they made so proudly in this particular bill, particularly around the issues of how they're going to receive consent.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thanks to the member for Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou for that question. You know, again, in terms of false advertising that the member for Trois-Rivières referred to, one example of that is this Liberal government's claim that this bill somehow strengthens Indigenous input. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, is that Canada has had a long-standing legal framework around Indigenous consultation. What we have seen from this government, the record of this government, instead of consulting with Indigenous communities, this government is blocking major pipeline and other energy projects, preventing Indigenous communities from entering into equitable partnerships. That's what this government is doing without consulting Indigenous communities.
Reprise du débat, l'honorable député.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. I would like to indicate that he will have time to do his speech, but questions will be taken after the time set aside for question period. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm delighted to follow up on my colleague from Alberta. You will see that Quebec and Alberta can agree. And this is one of my colleagues who works hard for his riding and his province, and I tip my hat to him. Mr. Speaker, I hope my colleague convinced the Liberal government to improve this law. The law that changes is an act to enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator Act to amend the Navigation Protection Act and make consequential amendments to other acts. In other words, it is an omnibus bill. And I will demonstrate that this is so. Part 1 enacts the Impact Assessment Act and repeals the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act 2012. The Impact Assessment Act. Part 2 enacts the Canadian Energy Regulator Act, which establishes the Canadian Energy Regulator and sets out its composition, mandate, and powers. The role of the regulator is to regulate the exploitation, development, and transportation of energy within Parliament's jurisdiction. Point 3. Part 3 amends the Navigation Protection Act. There's a saying that this is just a dog's breakfast. It's over 360 pages long. Provinces are unable to comment on this bill. It's too thick and it's too complex. We're told that we want to improve the process. Well, Mr. Speaker, we need to correct our course. This government makes us out to be the nasty conservatives. Every single day, they try to label us as the ones who want to destroy the planet. Nobody in the official opposition gets up in the morning to destroy our planet, but we do want to develop it intelligently. I just want to remind my colleagues on the other side, part of the Liberal Party, part of the party of window dressing, part of the party of their clique, that the Conservative government took many steps to fight climate change. We created the Air Quality Regulatory Program. We set out new rules to reduce the emissions of cars and light trucks. We established new rules to reduce emissions of heavy-duty vehicles and their engines. We proposed rules to align our standards on those of the American Group 3 standards and to reduce emissions for vehicles and sulfur and gas. We undertook to set out targets for hydrofluorocarbons, black carbon, and methane. I see my colleague from Mégantic L'Érable who's smiling. There's a lot of agreement in Quebec, and that is how we build things with our fellows from Alberta, from Quebec, from all provinces. And I will keep going down the list. We set out new rules to reduce coal-based power generation emissions. We set up measures to support carbon capture technologies. We implemented measures to support the development of alternative energy sources and to ensure that we had carbon capture technologies. We improved the annual report for main environmental indicators, including greenhouse gases. And another point that will probably surprise my friends on the other side, we even eliminated, you heard me, we eliminated tax breaks for oil sands. Stop talking about dirty oil from Alberta. All of these measures allowed Canada to have a good report card on the environment and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, all that under the previous government. Did you know that in 2014, the last full year of our government, we succeeded in reducing greenhouse gas emissions? As a percentage of worldwide emissions, Canada's part diminished by 15%. You can't do more than that. We can't do more than that because we're no longer in power. And what have they done since then? our emissions went from 1.9 to 1.6% of the worldwide total. These results were not achieved under the Liberals. The Conservatives are the ones who reduced greenhouse gas emissions. We must not have done such a bad job because the Liberal government took our targets for greenhouse gas emissions. So if we did such a bad job, if we don't consult scientists, and if they say they consult scientists, they probably consulted the same scientists that we did. And what did they do? They took the results of our scientists and their scientists to set the very same target. As a member of Parliament in my riding, yes, a Conservative MP, I set up in my riding of Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier a committee on the circular economy. Yes, Conservatives work to preserve our planet in different ways in all of our various ridings. When this Liberal government talks about dirty oil from the West, I would like to remind the Liberal MPs on the other side that it is the Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, who created the oil sands. Yes, you heard me, Pierre Elliott Trudeau. It was probably to offset Canada's deficits, because it was under the reign of Pierre Elliott Trudeau that we created deficits in Canada. Who is the son of that Prime Minister? Indeed, it is the current Prime Minister of Canada, the son of Pierre Elliott Trudeau. Is his son doing the same thing, trying to find revenue to try and slow the hemorrhage of expenditures by legalizing marijuana? At least with the father. We didn't work to encourage the abuses of the party and organized crime. I mentioned in the House recently that this government is quite naive to think that organized crime is going to stop selling marijuana when the Liberals' law passes. What I heard in the papers is that, or rather in my riding, prices are down. In my riding, during meetings with my fellow citizens, people keep telling me how they think this is irresponsible and this is not the right way to go about things. But let's come back to the main subject at hand. After being elected, making all kinds of promises to environmental groups, and after 28 months in power, this Liberal government has not lived up to expectations. Nothing in this law could improve effectiveness, and nothing to ensure reasonable timelines to do smart, sustainable development. Allow me to take a drink of water. It's a natural resource. We have to protect it. We have to develop it intelligently. Nothing in this law, as I was saying, to improve effectiveness or to ensure reasonable timelines. Furthermore, this law extends the process and creates uncertainty, despite scientific evaluations validating the maintenance of environmental standards. Developers will not be able to do their projects because the minister, according to her goodwill or her relationship with project promoters, will have entire discretionary power over whether those projects go ahead. Why not be clear and set out very clear standards that are based on scientific evidence? Why put the powers into the hands of the Liberals? We've seen what they're able to do with Liberal fundraisers, the friends of the Liberal government who invest in pot, the Minister of Finance who does transactions and who changes the Pension Plan Act. Do you remember the Gomery Commission? This bill is nothing but window dressing. We've changed how long the process is to go on. Honestly, Mr. Speaker, this is just window dressing. It's not serious. It's irresponsible. They set timelines, ask for scientific studies, but the minister retains full decision-making power. We agree that it's important to improve how we do things. As I said from the very beginning, we, the Conservatives on this side of the House, do want to protect the planet. But we need to think about new ways of protecting the environment. Once again, this government is proposing a document and cares not at all about the objectives that need to be reached. It's all about appearances, like it with many departments and files. Can we do sustainable development in balance with economic development? Why this circus? Why not set up effective mechanisms to protect our resources and develop them intelligently? Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member will have 5 minutes remaining for questions and comments once we return to this bill.
Members, déclaration des députés. The honourable member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, last week in my riding of Kelowna Lake Country, I had the pleasure of attending the 2018 Lake Country Chamber of Commerce Business Excellence Awards. I would like to take this opportunity to recognize all the companies and individuals that were nominated for an award and take a moment to acknowledge the winners. Bernard Dwanek and Leisner, Dairy Queen, UBR Services Printing and Copies, Interior Savings, Nalu Massage Therapy and Wellness, Sip Happen Wine Tours, Sun City Physiotherapy, Neon Consulting, and Art Walk. The Young Entrepreneur of the Year award went to Kim Chapman, and the Business Person of the Year was Garth McKay. I would also like to congratulate the Lake Country Chamber for putting on an exceptional event. Mr. Speaker, small business often plays a bigger role in smaller districts as it increases both the employment opportunities and quality of life for their entire community. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for North Okanagan Shuswap.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This summer, disadvantaged individuals will not find the help they need. The hungry may not be served meals. Seniors may not receive the companionship from trainees. Summer camps may need to reduce their operating weeks or camp spaces. Students will not find summer job where they could develop their work skills and advance to better employment. Some would ask, how can this be? What has changed? Well, this Liberal government has decided to place their own values test on employers applying for the Canada Summer Jobs Program, a values test that organizations in my riding of North Okanagan Shuswap cannot, in good conscience, support. These organizations for years have supported Canada's summer jobs and provided services to children, seniors, and the disadvantaged. I urge this government to abandon their cold-hearted attack on our faith-based organizations and remove the attestation box requirement for the Canada Summer Jobs Program.
Member for Miramichi Grand Lake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this week marks the 6th anniversary of the House of Commons unanimously passing Shannon's Dream, which called for safe and equitable education for First Nation children.
We know that schools on reserve are seriously underfunded. That's why we're investing $2.6 billion over 5 years to support primary and secondary school services on reserve. This is in addition to the nearly $1 billion set aside for education infrastructure, which will help fund 169 projects, some of which have already been completed.
I'm pleased to highlight that in my riding, funding has been approved for a new K-8 school on Elsipogtog First Nation to replace the existing 35-year-old one. Every First Nation child deserves the best start in life, and this begins with properly funded education. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The
honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, imagine it's a beautiful winter day. You're lacing up your skates, you're putting on your helmet and equipment, and getting ready to take to the ice as thousands of spectators cheer you on. But this isn't hockey, because you're at the top of a huge hill, and you need to make it down a steep course full of bumps, jumps, and curves. You need to do it as fast as possible, and you have to get there in one piece. This extreme sport is called downhill ice cross, and part of the World Championships of this sport will be held, or are being held, in La Sarre right now until Saturday. After Austria, Switzerland, Russia, Finland, and France, and the United States, Abitibi-Témiscamingue now has the chance to host this prestigious competition, part of a world tour that attracts athletes from many countries where winter sports are a way of life, just like they are in Canada. I'd like to congratulate the president of the La Sarre Ice Challenge, Mr. Yannick Provencher, the organizing committee, the city, and the many volunteers who made this kind of event possible and who have put Abitibi-Témiscamingue in the international spotlight.
Hastings, Lennox, and Addington.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to celebrate International Women's Day and to pay tribute to the incredible women in my riding who are helping to organize the 4th annual International Women's Day event, which is taking place in Napanee tomorrow. Women across our community will gather together at the Napanee Legion to recognize the incredibly important role that women and girls play in our society. As the organizers have said, they are coming forward, they are standing together with one voice, they are building beside and encouraging one another, and they are gaining strength within their communities. I will also be celebrating my amazing wife Irene and daughter Haley, and the incredible women on my constituency office team, Valerie, Jennifer, Stella, Kathy, and Nancy, whose strength, compassion, and dedication are an inspiration to me. Mr. Speaker, I invite you to join me in saluting these women and to join all Canadians in proudly celebrating International Women's Day. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to pay tribute to a World War II veteran we lost earlier this week. Henry Chick Hewitt spent nearly all his life in Oshawa. Like so many of his generation, he valiantly answered the call to defend our freedom during the Second World War. Chick served as a navigator on a Lancaster bomber. He flew 35 missions with the Royal Air Force's 90th Squadron in 1944-1945, but his service didn't end there. He went on to contribute immensely to the 420 Wing Oshawa and many other groups in my community. Anyone who knew Chick had great respect and admiration for him. His boundless love for his country and for his family was well known to all. It was my privilege last year to award Chick with a Canada 150 Volunteer Medal for his service to Oshawa and to Canada. Mr. Speaker, there is no doubt in my mind that Chick Hewitt was a true Canadian hero whose bravery will never be forgotten. May he rest in peace.
The Honourable Member for Fredericton.
In honour of International Women's Day, March 8th, I highlight the 25th anniversary of the Muriel McQueen Ferguson Centre for Family Violence Research. Named after women's rights activist and the first woman Speaker of the Senate, the Muriel McQueen Ferguson Centre has been an active part of the solution to overcome gender-based violence in New Brunswick and throughout Atlantic Canada.
For a quarter century, staff at the centre have helped to raise awareness about gender-based violence. They have worked tirelessly to get governments, universities, police groups, and communities to collaborate on research projects and to take action to help service providers and to help survivors of gender-based violence.
I thank and congratulate the Muriel McQueen Ferguson Centre for all the work they have done to prevent gender-based violence and for helping make New Brunswick and all of Atlantic Canada a better and safer place for women and girls.
Member for Brampton West.
Mr. Speaker, March is Pharmacist Awareness Month, and on that occasion, I'd like to recognize the important role that pharmacists play in Canada's healthcare system by promoting safe and effective medication management, health promotion, and disease prevention. As a registered nurse, I can tell you every day pharmacists work closely with other healthcare professionals to empower patients by providing them with the information that they need to get more involved in their care. Let's also underline the key implication of our local pharmacists in helping to address the opioid crisis in our communities by providing advice to patients on the proper use of prescription drugs. And they work collaboratively with provinces and territories to support access to naloxone in communities from coast to coast to coast. To all of them across Canada, Mr. Speaker, we say thank you for your dedication and commitment to keeping Canadians safe and healthy. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Foothills.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, we celebrate International Women's Day. We celebrate women from all countries, all backgrounds, and all faiths. Today, we celebrate the fact that all women are valuable and have incredible contributions to make to society. Every woman is full of potential and able to positively impact the world. Every woman deserves equal opportunity to do so. This year's theme is Press for Progress. Today, we renew our commitment to creating a world where women and men exist as equals, people of equal value, equal worth, and equal dignity. Today, we celebrate the greatness in each and every woman around the globe. Today, we commit to being her champion. She is strong, she is capable, she's intelligent, she is talented, she is inspiring. She's a grandmother, a mother, spouse, daughter, sister, niece, friend, and co-worker. Today we commit to empowering women who they are. We commit to putting aside our biases and overcoming stereotypes. We commit to being her champion.
Honourable member for Ville-Marie, le Sud-Ouest, Île-des-Sœurs.
Mr. Speaker, Montreal is home to the country's brightest minds and top research institutions, and when I visited them, I kept hearing the same things. They were concerned that support for fundamental research was lagging, that there were not enough opportunities for those trying to start their research careers, and that they wouldn't have the necessary resources to maintain their facilities. Whether it's $925 million in new funding for fundamental research through the granting councils, $210 million in new support for early career researchers, a $231 million boost to the Research Support Fund, or the $763 million for the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, Budget 2019 delivers to students and researchers. Nous savons que les emplois...
We know that the jobs of the future depend on Canadians' ability to adapt, innovate, and maintain Canada's competitive edge in an ever-changing, globalizing world. That's why we are continuing to invest in Canadian researchers and their work. This support is critical if we really want to help future generations succeed.
Bravo.
The honourable member for Tobic-Mactaquac.
Mr. Speaker, Canadian Agricultural Safety Week is an annual public awareness campaign organized by the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association in conjunction with the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, encouraging Canadians to focus on the importance of agricultural safety. This week runs in 2018 from March 11th to the 17th. The Campagne de Rural Agriculture.
The Agricultural Safety Ribbon was the brainchild of Alberta Agriculture and Forestry. The ribbons are made in the community, for the community, and they are available to anyone who cares about the safety of Canadian farmers, as well as the safety of their families and workers.
Agricultural safety is something that hit home for me this fall when my daughter Emma experienced a close call while working during the potato harvest this past fall. And luckily she was okay, but it drove home for me the importance of encouraging agricultural safety and encouraging young Canadians working in the agricultural industry to look after themselves and always be diligent while working around heavy machinery. This week I had the honour of facilitating the distribution of Ag Safety ribbons to both sides of the House, and I ask this Canadian Ag Safety Week, please wear the ribbon, talk about farm safety, and make a commitment to keep all Canadian farmers, their families, and their workers free from injury. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Carlton.
His autistic son taught Randy Lewis the amazing and underutilized potential of workers with disabilities. His job as Walgreens vice president gave him a chance to do something about it, hiring over 1,000 workers with disabilities at Walgreens' mercilessly competitive distribution centers, earning the same wages and doing the same work as everyone else. His book, No Greatness Without Goodness, recounts the touching story of her mother breaking into tears when her adult disabled son came home with his first paycheck, which was bigger than either of his parents had ever earned. I'm pleased to announce today that Randy Lewis has endorsed the Opportunity for Workers with Disabilities Act, which will allow workers with disabilities to earn more in wages than they lose in clawbacks and taxes. It'll give thousands of people the pride and independence of a job and what Martin Luther King called the dignity of labor.
The Honourable Member for Acadie-Bathurst. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pride to stand today in this House to congratulate the Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of Families, Children and Social Development. Budget 2018 has highlighted the importance and value of seasonal industries and their workers. This acknowledgement from the government comes with a historic financial allocation of $240 million to address the EI service gap known as the black hole. The government immediately made $10 million available to the provinces so that those governments could quickly roll out a plan to address the needs in local and specific way.
$130 million over the next 2 years so that key provinces can quickly identify a solution to avoid having the black hole reoccur in the future. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, the hardworking people of Acadie-Bathurst and all workers in seasonal industries will now have access to the supports they need when they need them the most. I want to thank them for their tireless efforts and their advocacy. The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières. Mr. Speaker, despite the Liberal government's disappointing budget, I would like to sincerely thank the residents of Trois-Rivières for mobilizing around an inspiring project for our city and our region, the high-frequency train. This mobilization was and is exceptional. Politicians from all political parties and all levels of government were united except for one. Allow me to quote the mayor of Trois-Rivières, who encapsulated everyone's disappointment on this issue. He said, "It would be easier to get to the moon." I also want to acknowledge the hard work of the Trois-Rivières Chamber of Commerce and industry representatives, as well as the citizens who took action, writing open letters and emails, signing petitions, and participating in my 10%er campaigns. Thank you to each and every one. I also want to say that despite our bafflement at the government's inaction, their voices are being heard, and my voice in Ottawa is even stronger when we all stand together.
The Honourable Member for Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Reverend Billy Graham walked into the arms of the Saviour he served faithfully for decades. He was 99 years old. Today, thousands will gather to celebrate his life. Billy Graham, from the age of 15, devoted his life to God, sharing the good news of Jesus Christ to millions around the world. He had a simple message that provided hope to the hopeless and light to those in darkness. It can be summed up in 3 words: faith in Christ. That simple message was taken from the Bible in the book of John, chapter 3, verse 16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Mr. Speaker, Graham once wrote, quote, "Someday you will read or hear that Billy Graham is dead. Don't believe a word of it. I should be more alive than I ever was. I will just have changed my address. I have gone into the presence of God." Reverend Graham, you have fought the good fight, finished the race, kept the faith, enjoy to the full the reward of your faith in Christ. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mississauga Centre.
Mr. Speaker, are you like the thousands of Canadians who are planning a vacation this spring break? Have you packed your sunscreen, your camera? Have you settled on what type of activities you'll be doing during your trip? Do me a favor, though. Before leaving, you should visit Canada's best source of traveling information at travel.gc.ca. You will find in-depth information about your destination, including travel advisory, security conditions, law and local customs, and climate data. There's even a traveler's checklist that includes Canadian government contact details just in case of an emergency. You should also download our smart travel app. It will place all of that info and more in the palm of your hand. Mr. Speaker, don't think just because you're the Speaker, you're immune from mishaps on your trips. I just want you to be prepared. And also, make sure you have an amazing vacation, and don't forget to bring us back lots of pictures.
Well, thank you for those encouraging words. Oral questions, question orale. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
With its over 1.2 billion people, provide Canada with the largest potential for export growth. Unfortunately, that potential and opportunity is being damaged because of the Prime Minister's incompetence. Last night, India raised the duty on Canadian chickpeas to 60%, a clear signal that India is understandably upset, and Canadian chickpea producers are the first to pay the price. The Prime Minister has damaged our relationship with India. What is he going to do to fix this mess?
The Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the colleague for the question. As you know, we value our relationship with India. In fact, I was just in India in November leading the largest trade mission in Canada history with 150 people from the Canadian side. We met 11 ministers from India. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, and the member knows well, we raise that issue at every single meeting. And I will continue to raise that because what our farmers want, they want stability and predictability, and we're going to be working to provide that to our Canadian farmers.
Okay, we can start again. The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the minister makes my very point. It actually doesn't matter how hard he works, because when the Prime Minister is blaming India for causing problems with his trip, the Prime Minister is damaging all of the work that everybody in this place is trying to do for Canadians. His conspiracy theory against India is causing a breakdown in our relationship. The Indian government said yesterday that the chickpea tariff increase was due to circumstances that make it necessary to take immediate action. Well, we all know what circumstances they are referring to. Why did the Prime Minister act so irresponsibly both while in India and now at home?
The Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, as I said to my honourable colleague, we were there in November, the Prime Minister there. This was to advance our farmers. I was just in Regina last week. Their cause with respect to policies, and we're going to continue to work. We understand that our farmers need stability and predictability. That's what I brought to the Indian side. And what they want is about food security. We're going to continue to work together.
Okay, I just thought I'd stop for a second because I was having a hard time hearing the answer. Okay, the Honourable Minister, please proceed.
I was just saying, Mr. Speaker, as the member understands, well, I was just in Western Canada last week, and we're going to continue to work with our farmer. I spoke to Pulses Canada. We're going to continue to work with them because what we want for our farmers is stability and predictability. So you can trust us, Mr. Speaker, that as a whole of government, we're going to make sure that we work for our farmers in a
The Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Well, if farmers have friends like the Liberals and this Prime Minister, they don't need any enemies because look at the results that these Liberals are getting. Increased tariffs. So maybe just stay home instead of causing all of this damage. Instead of maintaining a strong trading relationship and ensuring access for Canadian producers, the Prime Minister has made protecting his own image and covering up his blunders his main priority, and he's put that in front of the interests of Canadians. Again, the Prime Minister has created a huge mess. We are seeing the results by these tariff increases. This could just be the first shot across the bow. What is the Prime Minister going to do?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Innovation.
Mr. Speaker, this was a trip that was focused on creating and enhancing our business relationship with India. We welcomed $1 billion, Mr. Speaker, in total investments between Canadian and Indian companies, which will lead to the creation of close to...
Okay, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
As I said, Mr. Speaker, the trip will lead to the creation of close to 6,000 good, well-paying middle-class jobs in Canada, such as Tech Mahindra, a leader in tech IT services, which will be investing $100 million to establish a new centre of excellence for artificial intelligence in Canada. The Jubilant Bhartia Group, which will be investing $100 million to expand its facilities in Kirkland.
L'honorable député de Sherbrooke. The honourable member for Sherbrooke, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, when our Prime Minister was in India, he behaved like a bad actor in a low-budget film. It was a diplomatic failure, a security failure, and an economic failure. We're learning that the Indian government has announced an increase in the tariff on chickpeas from 40 to 60%. This film was a comedy, now it's a horror film. Our international relations have been suffering since this government came to power. The Prime Minister is making mistakes, but Canadians have to pay. The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, there's no one who works harder for farmers than this Prime Minister. When I was on the last mission, it was our biggest international mission. We met more than 11 ministers, and I can tell my colleague that with every meeting we brought this issue up. We are working for Canadian farmers, and Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we know how important farmers are. The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke, Haute-Saint-Charles. Yes, my colleague is working very hard. The problem is his boss. Mr. Speaker, after this disastrous trip to India, we learned that Canada's security has been compromised. We learned yesterday that these diplomatic faux pas are going to cost the Canadian economy because India has increased the tariff on chickpeas. Does the Prime Minister understand that what he does internationally has consequences, and what is he going to do to fix our diplomatic relations? Mr. Speaker, as I said to my honourable colleague, we are continuing our discussions. India is a major international partner for Canada, and look at what the Prime Minister did in India. There have been several thousand jobs for Canada, $1 billion in trade. We are doing as much as we can to increase the benefits from this relationship. Mr. Speaker, yesterday we learned that Donald Trump has attacked our industry again. After softwood, it's now the aluminum industry which is going to suffer from the unwarranted decisions made by the American president. 10% on aluminum products. And in Quebec, Aluminum is a big industry. This is protectionist attack. What is this government going to do to help us deal with this protectionist policy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Monsieur le Président, en tant que...
Mr. Speaker, all commercial restrictions on aluminum in Canada are unacceptable, absolutely unacceptable. We have a very integrated economy, and we're part of the supply chain, which serves the Americans as well. If restrictions are imposed, we will defend our rights, we will defend our trade interests, and we will defend Canadian workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Groundhog Day again already, Mr. Speaker, because once more we see the U.S. administration targeting a vital Canadian industry. This time it's the steel sector. Here's the pattern with this Liberal government, and it's not a good one. While they sit in round after round after round of NAFTA talks, Donald Trump targets Canadian industry after industry after industry with illegal tariffs. Here's Trump's Canadian hit list so far: softwood lumber, aerospace, agriculture, and now steel. So exactly how many more tariffs and attacks will Canadian workers have to face before Liberals reach a durable and fair agreement?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we will always defend Canadian interests and values, and as a key NORAD and NATO ally and the #1 customer of American steel, any trade restrictions on Canadian steel and aluminum are not acceptable. Our steel and aluminum industry is highly integrated and supports American manufacturing supply chains. Our government has raised this point directly with the highest levels of the United States administration, and we will continue to do so. And we reserve the right to take responsive measures to defend our trade interests and Canadian workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, you ever been on one of those family vacations where your dad makes you take so many photos that just out of sheer desperation you have to throw yourself on the ground? Well, that's how Canadians felt watching the Prime Minister's terrible trip to India. Not only that, but he also managed to create a major international security incident in the process. And now, adding insult to injury, we now learn that the Indian government is raising a tariff on Canadian chickpeas. So my question is simple. Did the Prime Minister raise the issue of trade? And now that we have a problem, is he going to do something to help Canadian farmers who are being targeted?
Minister for International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, there is no government that is working harder for farmers in Canada. That I can assure you. When I was there last November, we met 11 ministers of the Indian government. We made sure that every single meeting we had representatives from Pulse Canada with us. We made sure that we talked with our Indian counterpart about stability and predictability. We made sure that the Indian government would understand we want to be a trusted partner, but we needed to ensure a long-term solution which is based on science. That's exactly what we've done, and this is exactly what the Prime Minister did during his last trip.
I want to remind the honourable members that holding up posters with someone's picture on it is considered a prop. So I won't point out any member in particular, but I just want to make sure that it's not happening again.
The honourable member for Hochelaga. Mr. Speaker, the bad news just keeps on coming with respect to the trip to India this morning. We learn in La Presse that the government extrapolated job creation figures in its announcement in India. Rather than 5,800 jobs, it would be more closer to 2,738, and that was the good news. Is this government able to tell us what was the purpose of this trip? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, I can answer my honourable colleague that the purpose of the trip was trade and strengthening our commercial ties to India. We have $1 billion in investment between the two countries and almost 6,000 jobs created for the middle class. I can give you examples. There's Tech Mahindra, which is a leader in information technology, which will set up a centre of excellence in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member.
Atwal affair gets more sordid by the day. Yesterday, in his elevator press conference, the public safety minister suggested that it was okay for the national security advisor to share confidential information with the media, but not okay for that same information to be shared with members of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Why was the Indian conspiracy theory okay to share with journalists to help get the Prime Minister out of a crisis, but not okay to share with the House of Commons, where Canadian sends MP to hold them to account?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable colleague across has been in this House for a long time. He well knows that we cannot discuss specific intelligence information that is received from national security agencies. He's well aware of that.
Okay, I'll let the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But the independent, nonpartisan advice that we receive from our public servants is something that we listen to and we act on. Unlike the party opposite, we do not particize or play games with our public service. We make sure we listen to their advice and act accordingly.
Honourable Member for Durham.
Mr. Speaker, the point made by the Parliamentary Secretary is absurd. They're saying it's okay for the PMO to share confidential information with journalists that Canadians, including members of Parliament, will then read in the paper, but it's not okay to share that same information with parliamentarians or parliamentary committees to hold the Prime Minister and that member to account for this atrocious trip? When will they admit that the cover-up of the Atwell affair is worse than the crime?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's what that member is saying. That's certainly not representative of the facts whatsoever. Again, to be very clear, and the member knows this well, we cannot, under any circumstance, discuss specific intelligent or information that received from our national security agencies. The member has been in government. He knows that very well, and that is a rule that must be adhered to. We follow the advice of our public servants. We stand behind that advice. We don't play partisan games with it, and we act on it when we're given that information.
The Honourable Member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has accused the Indian government of being involved in inviting his convicted terrorist friend, Jaspal Atwal, to a state dinner. Yet one of his own Liberal MPs has taken the blame and been reprimanded for issuing the invitation. The Prime Minister does not seem to realize he has created a diplomatic disaster, as India has responded by raising tariffs on some products by 50%. Will he issue an apology to the Government of India, or will he continue to allow his accusations to cost Canadians?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as I've said in this place, the invitation in question should have never been sent. And when the information was found out about this individual, that invitation was immediately rescinded. The Member of Parliament who advanced that name has apologized and made it clear that there was an error that occurred. We absolutely, and without question, as I have said, stand behind our public service and the recommendations that they make to us. We listen to their advice in this and every instance and act on it accordingly.
Honorable Député de Lévis-Lotbinière.
The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal honeymoon is now over. Following the disgraceful diplomatic incident between Canada and India, a Liberal MP was punished for having invited the Prime Minister's friend, Jaspal Atwal, to India, and India has bumped up its tariff from 40 to 60%. This is the price Canada has to pay for this diplomatic debacle. Mr. Speaker, it'll take more than dancing in the sun to deal with this incident. What does the Prime Minister intend to do to remedy this diplomatic disaster? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. The invitation was a mistake, and as soon as information was available about this individual, the invitation was rescinded. And all public officials, all government officials, and their services are essential, and we have great confidence in our officials.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's trip to India is best described as a theatre of the absurd. Mr. Atwell has deep connections with the Liberal Party. They blame a backbench MP for inviting him to dinner. Then they bring out this preposterous theory that the Indian government was responsible and they were trying to embarrass the Prime Minister. The result, a serious diplomatic incident and a punishing tariff on our pulse products, hurting our Canadian farmers. What's the Prime Minister going to do to fix this mess?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I've been very clear that the invitation that was made should not have been made and that it was rejected. But here's my problem. Okay, when the party opposite that was responsible for devastating cuts to our national security infrastructure, $530 million to the RCMP, $390 million from CBSA, and the list goes on, stands and gives lectures on national security when it ignored the advice of Justice O'Connor in 2006, Justice Iacobucci in 2009. It's a little rich, Mr. Speaker. So I would ask them to rethink their line of attack.
Honourable Member for Foothills.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister must realize that his antics on the global stage have very real consequences. The casualties for this latest diplomatic nightmare are Canadian farmers. The only souvenir from the Prime Minister's latest family vacation is successfully derailing Canada's trade relationship with India. Yesterday, India increased the tariffs on our chickpeas from 40 to 60%, further jeopardizing Canada's $4 billion pulse industry. Will the Prime Minister please explain why he is so willing to sacrifice Canadian farmers just to maintain this ridiculous conspiracy theory?
The Honourable Minister for Trade.
Mr. Speaker, it is ludicrous to make the assertion that the member is making. Clearly, we have been working for farmers in Canada, and we are always working for farmers. I was just in Regina last week, talking with the people in Pulse Canada, making sure that we work with the Indian government. This is the best way we can do to ensure that our farmers would have stability and predictability in the Indian market. We will continue to do so. I've raised that at every single occasion I had a communication with an Indian official. That's what the Prime Minister did. That's why this whole government is doing, is defending our farmers across Canada.
The Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Mr. Speaker, this week we all saw what could be the fastest ever Liberal broken promise. The government has clarified it will actually now just study, not implement pharmacare, and any future program will not be universal, public, or free. And now the Finance Minister is facing conflict of interest allegations on his fake pharmacare proposal because of his link with Morneau Chappelle, Canada's largest benefits consultancy provider. Will the Finance Minister recuse himself from any pharmacare discussions because of the serious apparent conflict of interest?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are proud of their publicly funded universal Medicare system, one that's based on the individual's need and not on the ability to pay. Yet we recognize there is certainly room for improvement. We have created an advisory council on the implementation of a national pharmacare program with the mandate to study, to evaluate, and to ultimately make recommendations to government on a path forward to implement pharmacare that puts Canadians first. This initiative builds on the good work that's already been undertaken by our government to improve access to necessary prescription medications for all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Député.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagot. Mr. Speaker, it's not just us who are asking for this recusal. 3 major organizations, including the Canada Labour Congress, have asked that the Minister withdraw from discussions around pharmacare in order to avoid another conflict of interest, but also to make sure he doesn't work against public interest. Canadians need a pharmacare program that is nationwide. Will the Prime Minister have the Minister of Finance withdraw from discussions and make sure that this consultation is not simply another tactic to break another promise? Mr. Speaker, Canadians are very proud of our healthcare program. We want to meet people's needs. This system can be improved. We have created an advisory committee for the implementation of a pharmacare program. This committee is mandated with looking at various recommendations and scenarios in order to have a program that benefits all Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. Mr. Speaker, really, listening to the Liberals talk about how concerned they aren't about agriculture, When I asked the Agriculture Minister a question, he pulled out his 2017 budget, nothing in the 2018 budget. Mr. Speaker, we've learned today that the Prime Minister's trip to India simply worsened the situation for our pulse producers. So why are the Liberals so cheap with Canadian farmers? The Parliamentary Secretary, Mr. Speaker, as in the 2017 budget, we identified agriculture as a key sector. And we have put millions of dollars into agriculture, into science and innovation. We have been working on Asian markets. We've helped dairy producers. We've helped women in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, we are continuing to create growth and opportunities for farmers and their families.
Speaker, if they're working on improving the Asian market, why have we got a 50% increase in chickpeas? In the past 2 weeks, or 2 of the past 4 weeks in Manitoba, the one railroad has only met 6% of the railcar orders placed by shippers. That means tens of thousands of tons of grain, contracted grain, Mr. Speaker, is not moving, which has virtually stalled cash flow for farmers on the prairies. Will this Liberal government stop delaying? We warned you about C-49 last fall. It's too late. Farmers can't wait. Action is needed. Reinstate our previous government's Conservative government's effective measures and get grain moving now.
Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, our government recognizes the importance of efficient and reliable rail service, especially moving Canadian grain and other commodities to market. You know, after enduring 10 years of Band-Aid actions on behalf of the other government, we introduced Bill C-49. It will provide a strong and reliable, efficient freight rail system for the future. The Minister of Transport and Agriculture have been in contact with the railways, urging them to do better, and we will closely monitor the situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Lethbridge.
Mr. Speaker, our track record is clear. We have always stood up for Canadian farming families from coast to coast, and we will continue to do so. Look, here's the deal. Western grain producers have faced a disastrous shipping season due to this government. In order to provide for their families, they rely on getting their grain to market to bring money in order to put food on their tables. Their ask is very simple. Grain farmers simply want the Liberals to start listening to them and then take action. When will this government resolve the backlog and get the grain moving?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, again, we've proven time and time again that we're strongly committed to Canadian farmers and our agricultural industry. Unlike the Band-Aid solutions of the past, with an expiry date, our government put forward Bill C-49 that would meet the long-term sustainable needs of users for years to come. And to quote the Western Grain Elevators Association, this bill, C-49, is a significant improvement over existing legislation and a positive step forward for the grain industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For Surest Moose Mountain.
Mr. Speaker, the only thing they've proven is that they can increase tariffs. Liberals think that they are good with numbers, so let's try these on for size. 38. That's the percentage of hopper cars supplied by CN and CP combined. 3,965. That's the number of outstanding orders for hopper cars, 300 more than last week. Millions. That's the amount of dollars in demurrage charges that are being passed on to our farmers. Farmers across Canada have bins full of grain, contracts to fill, and they need the cash flow to start preparing for seeding. Will the Liberals look at these numbers, do the right thing, and get this grain moving?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Transport.
Both ministers have been in contact with the railway companies. Well, you should care. We should care about talking to the railway companies because we need to find a permanent solution. Now, the contact with the railway companies have indicated that the temporary situation of early February is improving. And that's what we need, Mr. Speaker, an improvement on this performance. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Trois-Rivières.
Mr. Speaker, stakeholders in my region are disappointed by the lack of vision of the Liberal budget. Everyone was impatiently waiting for funding for the high-frequency train. But the government is throwing us back into another round of studies. It would seem that the presence of a regional minister in cabinet makes them more of a voice for Ottawa in the region than a voice for the region in Ottawa. It is time to act because the residents of Trois-Rivières have been waiting for far too long. The Liberals have announced billions in infrastructure that they are not spending. When will Trois-Rivières get its share of the amounts promised for infrastructure? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Transportation. Mr. Speaker, our government is developing the best approach in order to set up an effective and reliable rail transportation system for passengers. To do so, we have set aside funding in 2 budgets in order to study the proposal for Via Rail's high-frequency train. We are taking this project seriously. We're doing our homework regarding the number of potential passengers, and we are working actively with Via Rail. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. That's exactly what my colleague was saying. Throwing numbers around here is easy. But when the mayor of Trois-Rivières says, and I quote, "I think it's easier to go to the moon than to bring rail service back to the North Shore," I was sure that the member for Saint-Maurice-Champlain would be able to tip the scales, end quote. There is a problem. Families in the Pyrrhotite Grey area, victims of Yamashish, and I won't even go into supply management. Mr. Speaker, what good is an MP for Saint-Maurice-Champlain who has completely forgotten Mauricie? The Honourable Minister. I am delighted to answer the question of my honourable colleague. A minister in the region translates into millions of dollars of investment in the region. What I can tell my colleague for Trois-Rivières is that he did not read the budget well. Not only did we invest $3 million into studies for Via Rail, but we're investing into new trains and new wagons. The entire region should be delighted that the high-frequency train between Quebec and Windsor has been the object of real investment, and we will continue to work together in order to make this project a reality. The Honourable Member for Vimy. Mr. Speaker, 2017 was marked by multiple disasters and extended crises that created famines and violence in Africa, crises in Syria, Iraq, and Yemen, cyclones in the Caribbean, ethnic cleansing in Myanmar. In 2018, according to the UN, humanitarian needs have reached an unprecedented level. 136 million people need humanitarian assistance in 26 countries. Can the Minister for Development, or rather International Development, and the Francophonie tell this House about how the government is meeting these significant challenges? The Honourable Minister of International Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague for Vimy for her question and her commitment to the status of women. In our budget, there's $2 billion over 5 years, which is the biggest increase in 10 years. This will allow us to increase the impact of our feminist international assistance policy to help women and girls. It will help us to not only to promote change and peace, we are going to contribute to developing the economic, social, and political power of women and girls. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, this government inherited a short-term windfall from a housing bubble in Toronto and Vancouver, a booming U.S. and world economy, the doubling of oil prices, and what did they do with it all? They blew it. And now the results are coming in. Today we have disappointing economic growth numbers. Yesterday, the former chief economic analyst of Stats Canada revealed that investment in Canada is in a free fall. Why did they blow Canada's good fortune instead of setting it aside and preparing for the risks ahead?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Finance.
To look back at the last 2 years and where Canada was 2 years ago. We were debating whether we were in a recession or heading into a recession after 10 years of anemic growth under the previous government, where they've had the lowest employment growth since the Second World War, lowest growth of GDP since Mackenzie King, and all of this while adding $150 billion to the national debt. Canadians decided to take a different approach, one where we invest in our communities, invest in infrastructure, invest in science, something that they should have done a long time time ago, which has generated, over the last 2 years, the Canadian economy has the fastest growth in the G7, 600,000 jobs created. I think we can be proud of that record.
The honourable member for Carleton.
The fact that they inherited from the previous government. The previous government took Canada through the great global recession with the best job results, the lowest debt, the lowest taxes, and the biggest middle-class income growth of any government since.
I just want to remind the honourable members that heckling is bad whichever side it comes from. So I just want to ask everyone to respect the person who's speaking. The honourable member for Carleton.
Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the previous government brought 1 million new jobs despite the great global recession. They've inherited massive global and U.S. growth and delivered nothing but debt as far as the eye can see. Now the world is taking its money out of Canada and we're losing jobs along with it. Why?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
I think I'll use a line that the minister used yesterday. The member is entitled to his opinion, but not to his facts. And the fact is, over the last 2 years, it's 600,000 jobs that have been created in Canada. It's the fastest growth in the G7. And all of that, Mr. Speaker, while making Canada a more just and responsible society, giving more to families who need it the most, reducing taxes for 9 million Canadians. That's a record we ought to be proud of and they ought to listen to.
Absolutely.
The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. Let's talk about the facts. The facts in 2015. The Parliamentary Secretary, all the Liberal MPs said we're going to have little deficits and no deficit by 2019. The reality of today? Astronomical deficits and no idea of when we'll return to a balanced budget. The Conservatives are tired of the situation. Those who know how to count think that this makes no sense at all. A professor at HEC German Belzil said that it's very worrisome for the country's economy. This is highly imprudent. When will we return to balanced budgets? In what year? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Finance. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you that growth is what we achieved in the last several years by investing into infrastructure. And we've reduced our debt-to-GDP ratio. It is at the lowest rate since the end of the 70s. We are in the best fiscal position among G7 countries. And if we want to talk about economists, we can talk about Serge Coulombe, who said on Radio Canada that it is fiscally responsible to invest and to keep a deficit under control while making sure that the debt-to-GDP ratio continues to go down. And that is exactly what Canadians are expecting of us and what we're doing. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint Laurent. It's not just economists who are worried. The ministers of finance are worried as well. The Minister of Finance for Quebec, a Liberal minister, can't believe the government's current attitude. He said, we have to protect ourselves. When the economy is going well, balanced budgets are not just a dogma, but a necessity. He knows what he's talking about. He reestablished balanced books in Quebec. I have a simple question for my colleagues on the other side. Exactly on what date will we return to balanced budgets? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, we are on the right road because our debt-to-GDP ratio is at its lowest. It's lower than it was under the previous government. I heard my colleague talk recently about a government that spends so much to deliver so little. I would imagine he knows something about that because under Stephen Harper, they raised the debt of the country while they had the worst rate of growth for GDP, the worst growth in exports. He knows something about it. The facts speak for themselves. We've had the strongest rate of growth in G7 countries over the last 2 years.
Liberals promised to end the abuse of the temporary foreign worker program, but now they're on the cusp of signing the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a trade deal that's going to entrench the worst aspects of that program. Under TPP, foreign companies are going to be allowed to bring in their own workforce without advertising their jobs to Canadians, without getting a labour market opinion saying there aren't enough qualified Canadian tradespeople to do the job. Provincial governments are expressly prohibited from doing any kind of skills testing on these workers. So as a Canadian tradesperson myself, I want to know how it is the Liberals thought it was okay to sell out Canadian tradespeople at the international bargaining table.
The Honourable
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for allowing me the occasion to talk about the CPTPP, which we will be signing next week in Chile. Mr. Speaker, what this agreement does is opening up a market of 495 million people, 14% of the world economy, Mr. Speaker. This is people and businesses across our nations which are going to benefit from a new market in Asia Pacific. And I can assure the member that we've been in discussion with labor unions in this country. We're going to continue to engage with them because we want a strong agreement that works for every Canadian from coast to coast to coast.
The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Mr. Speaker, recently the high Arctic has seen record high temperatures, more than 30 degrees above normal, leading to melting ice in the middle of winter in the high Arctic. The Liberals promised to step up and have Canada do its part in the fight against climate change, but they kept Stephen Harper's weak, inadequate targets, and they aren't even going to meet those. And again, in this budget, there was little or nothing for real climate action. So when will the Liberals recognize the urgency and actually do what is necessary to fight climate change?
Minister of the Environment.
Mr. Speaker, I'm extraordinarily proud of our commitment to tackle climate change. After a decade in action by the previous government, we have stepped up. We have put a price on pollution across the country. We have phased out coal. We've made historic investments in clean technology. Innovation is going to make a real difference. And we're leading and pushing for ambitious implementation of the Paris Agreement on the world stage. We are all in on climate action. We are serious. We owe it to our kids.
Number 4, Lakeland.
Mr. Speaker, 32 BC First Nations have LNG pipeline agreements like the $40 billion Kitimat project, which will run through Haisla Nation traditional territory. But the Liberals' delays and added costs directed by anti-energy activists put it all at risk. Haisla Chief Counsel Crystal Smith sees a, quote, different future with LNG than the Sierra Club. She says she sees significant employment for her members, access to education, and a way forward to true self-sufficiency. Why do the Liberals ignore pro-natural resource Indigenous communities and deprive them of economic prosperity, social benefits, and thousands of jobs?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've said before in this House, we have done more for the natural resources sector and the energy sector particularly than the previous government did in the past 10 years. As you know, we are working on a new plan with Indigenous peoples around resource development to make it more, to have the ability for Indigenous peoples to have a greater say, more impact on the process. We believe that this is the right thing to do. Had the previous government, in fact, done that and engaged more Indigenous people, the Northern Gateway pipeline would not have been struck down by the courts. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Saskatoon, Grasswood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we all know, this Liberal government loves to spend money and make gestures. But this is a question on priorities. Canada has a very serious rural crime issue. Yet there was nothing, absolutely nothing in the current budget to address this serious problem. Why does this Liberal government continue to fail rural Canada and those who serve and protect?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the...
Mr. Speaker, we are absolutely committed to ensuring that the RCMP has the resources and support they need to keep our communities safe, whether that's in an urban environment or in a rural one. We are still reeling, unfortunately, from the $500 million that the Conservatives cut from the RCMP. That did real damage to rural communities and to keeping them safe. But in both the most current budget and others, we have been rebuilding that infrastructure, rebuilding that resiliency and strength so that we can provide for our rural communities the service, the support, and the security they deserve.
The Honourable Member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier. Mr. Speaker, Quebec is part of Canada, just like the 9 other provinces and 3 territories. We, the Conservative MPs for Quebec, are well placed to defend Quebec's interests in United Canada. How can this government justify investing $75 million only in the Atlantic provinces and excluding Quebec to fight the spruce budworm? A budworm is an insect that travels without any notion of provincial borders. What scientific study did this Liberal government use to justify how it's going about protecting the forestry industry? Where is the logic of this government? Why exclude Quebec? Can it explain what is unexplainable? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Millions to support the forestry sector in Quebec. We invested $87 million to support scientific research, including funding to combat the spruce budworm. More than $23 million in funding to Quebec to support innovation and transformation in the forest sector. And most recently, Budget 2018 provides $191 million to support softwood lumber jobs. Mr. Speaker, that's in addition to the Softwood Lumber Action Plan of $867 million that we're providing to support workers, communities, and companies affected by the unjust American duties. Thank you.
Member for Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Mr. Speaker, March is Nutrition Month, and this year's theme is Discovering the Power of Food. Our food choices are among the most important decisions we make every day for our health. We are seeing significant discussions among Canadians about the role that food choices play in healthy lifestyles. Can the Minister of Health update the House on our government's important actions with respect to healthy eating?
Good question. The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank my colleague from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley for his important question and also in his work on the Health Committee and Bill S228. Over the past year, we have launched our healthy eating strategy to make the healthy choice the easiest choice for all Canadians. As a part of the strategy, we are updating Canada's food guide, restricting marketing to kids, and also making nutrition labeling easier to use and also to understand. This month, I encourage all Canadians to learn more about healthy eating and also incorporating healthier choices in their diets. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Calgary, Rocky Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, last year's assault by the Revenue Minister on disabled Canadians has jeopardized registered disability savings plans for many Canadian families who saved their money and received matching grants from the government. Disability tax credit rejections mean some families who receive the credit for 10 years or more will lose their savings plans for the future care of their disabled children. What is the minister doing to ensure families of disabled children aren't losing their savings plans because of this minister's attack on the disabled?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Revenue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, our party is to ensure that all Canadians receive the credits to which they're entitled to. The agency is reviewing all disability tax credit application processed in the May 2017 clarification letter. The minister reinstated the Disability Advisory Committee and participated in the first meeting back in January of 2024. Experts from around the committee table will have opportunity to suggest improvements to how the agency administers program for Canadians with disabilities, experts who the Harper government silenced back in 2006.
The Honourable Member for the Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, the EI Working Well On Claim pilot project has been a success for Canadians receiving parental and caregiving benefits, allowing those EI recipients to return to work without jeopardizing their benefits. Could the Minister for Families, Children and Social Development please tell the House how Budget 2018 will expand on this project's success? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Families.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from the Bay of Quinte for highlighting the Working Well on Claim program. I'm pleased to say that Budget 2018 includes a proposal to make it permanent. In fact, not only will existing EI claimants be grandfathered in, but all EI recipients will be eligible, including those receiving maternity or sickness benefits. This way, people can return to work after an illness or the birth of a child and be able to keep more of their benefits. This budget delivers on providing Canadians with a flexible and compassionate EI system, and I thank the member for the question.
Well, member for Oshawa.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister blamed the Indian government for making him look bad. Newsflash, the PM is doing an excellent job of embarrassing us on the trade file all by himself. Softwood lumber failed. China trade failed. U.S. trade failed. And now the Americans have announced devastating tariffs on our steel and aluminum manufacturers. While our PM feels his job is only ceremonial, Canadians are looking for real leadership. Has the PM confirmed that Canada will be exempt from these new devastating tariffs? Mr. Speaker, jobs are at risk.
Hear, hear. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, as mentioned, Canada is a key NORAD and NATO ally, and as the #1 purchaser of American steel, any trade restrictions on Canadian steel and aluminum is unacceptable. This industry is fully integrated, and of course it provides enormous value added to the North American manufacturing supply chains. Should restrictions be imposed on Canadian steel and aluminum products, we will take and reserve the right to take responsive measures to defend our trade interests and Canadian workers. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. After farmers, Mr. Speaker, it's now the turn of the Government of Quebec to sound the alarm. The temporary foreign worker program is not working and is undermining Quebec's development. Because of a lack of specialized labor, our cutting-edge businesses are losing contracts and all of Quebec is affected. When will the government finally recognize that one-size-fits-all federal programs don't work and that it is absolutely urgent to grant Quebec all of the flexibility it needs to develop?
Well, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Employment.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague across from the block for that question. And I agree with her in that the one-size-fits-all model does not work, as it was imposed under the past Conservative government. We believe that Canadians deserve first crack at jobs in this country. We believe that there can be no suppression, wage suppression, or downward pressure on Canadian wages. We believe that workers that come in have to be protected by the laws of this country, but we believe that companies have to have access to a skilled workforce, something that was set out of balance with the past government.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. It's clear that Quebecers are not well served by one-size-fits-all programs, but they're also not being well served in another file, which is the spruce budworm. Irving's lobbyists seem to be getting a lot more out of the elected officials than Quebecers. After 31 meetings with ministers, Irving was able to get $75 million to fight the budworm, which is ravaging forests in the Maritimes. Irving owns 4.5 million acres in New Brunswick. Quebec, though, did not get a single penny for the same epidemic affecting an area larger than all of New Brunswick. $75 million for the Maritimes.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, our government has invested millions to support the forestry sector in Quebec. We invested $87 million to support scientific research, including funding to combat spruce budworm. More than $23 million in funding to Quebec to support innovation and transformation of the forestry sector. And most recently, in Budget 2018, we provided $191 million to support softwood lumber jobs. Mr. Speaker, that is in addition to our softwood lumber action plan of $867 million, which we're providing to support workers, families, and communities against the unjust, punitive American duties. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Joliette. We're not answering the question on the budworm. Why just the Maritimes and not Quebec? That's unacceptable. The federal budget for 2018 was a deep disappointment for Quebec, especially for Davies workers. Members on the other side who represent Quebec, well, I would be ashamed. Another budget and still nothing for Davie. Zero. But, surprise, millions for Irving. Obviously, the federal government does not deal with everyone on a level playing field, and no one seems to want to speak on Quebec's behalf. What is the government waiting for to give Davie a fair share of contracts? Are they waiting for the shipyard to turn into condos? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, the government has, of course, committed to providing to the Canada Coast Guard the ships it needs to serve the Canadian public. The government is pleased to work with the Davie Shipyard, which has done excellent work on the Asterisk in order to find a solution that will meet icebreaker needs. This will ensure the transportation of our goods and protect communities. We are determined to make sure that the Canada Coast Guard has the equipment it needs and that the Davie Shipyard is part of that solution.
Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have alarming news from the front lines of the climate emergency. The dispatches are deeply worrying. The defenses are falling against what protected our Arctic and kept it cold. The polar vortex is eroding. And like an advancing army, the warm air from the south has occupied our Arctic, driving temperatures up 25 degrees Celsius above normal in a sunless winter. No sun has warmed that ground for months, and yet the Arctic is in a heat wave. The time for complacency, pat answers, and fossil fuel appeasement is over. When will this government increase our targets and our ambitions to meet this accelerating threat?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment.
Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for her tireless advocacy on climate change. I was in the high Arctic this past summer with Inuit youth, and they talked to me about the very real impacts of climate change. It's extraordinarily worrying what we're seeing right now. I am working extremely hard to bring Canadians together on climate action. We're putting a price on pollution. We're phasing out coal. We're making historic investments in public transit, on energy-efficient social housing, on investments in clean technologies, and we need to be working with the world. We are all in on climate action. I would encourage all the parties opposite to do the same.
Et c'est la fin des questions orales aujourd'hui.
That's the end of question period today.
Daily routine, tabling, well, maybe we'll wait till everybody moves a bit and then we'll continue. Give a few minutes. We'll proceed. Tabling of documents. Don't have any. Statements by ministers. I'm sorry? Okay, very good. Introduction of government bills. Now statements by ministers. Reports for interparliamentary delegations. Presenting reports from committee. The Honourable Member for South Shore St. Margaret's.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to present in both official languages the 22nd report of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities in relation to Bill C-64, an act respecting wrecks, abandoned, dilapidated and hazardous vessels and salvage operations. The committee has studied the bill and has decided to report the bill back to the House with amendments. This bill, Mr. Speaker, was built on my motion M40 and will address environmental and economic concerns that have plagued our coastal communities for years. I look forward to the final vote on this bill in the House and hopefully the full support of all members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Présentation de rapport des
Presenting reports from committees, the Honourable Member for Hull-Aylmer. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour of tabling in both official languages the 22nd report of the Standing Committee on Finance concerning the supplementary estimates C 2017-2018.
Reports from presenting committee reports from committees. The Honourable Member for King Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have the honour to present in both official languages the following two reports from the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. The 12th report entitled Supplementary Estimate C 2017-18 and the 13th report entitled Interim Estimates 2018-19. I'm also rising to present in both official languages the 14th report of the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development in relation to Bill C-374, an act to amend the Historic Sites and Monument Act. That's the composition of the board. The committee has studied the bill and has decided to report the bill back to the House with amendments. Thank you.
Presenting reports from committee, the Honourable Member for Moose Jaw, Lake Centre, Lanigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have the honour to table in both official languages the following two reports of the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates. The 13th report on the topic of votes in the supplementary estimate C 2017-2018 that were referred to the committee, and the 14th report on the topic of votes in interim estimates 2018-2019 that were referred to committee.
Introduction of private members' bills. Première lecture de projet de loi intérêt public et...
First reading of Senate public bills. Motions. Presenting petitions.
The Honourable Member for Haldeman, Norfolk.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in the House today to table two petitions from 114 constituents. These petitioners call on the government's attention that, as it is now written, the application to the Canada Summer Jobs Program forces employers to choose between their charter-protected freedoms and eligibility for government programming. They're calling on the government to remove the discriminatory attestation requirement from the Canada Summer Jobs application and respect the charter rights of all Canadians, even though those may be different from the political agenda of the government of the day. Mr. Speaker, this brings the total number of petitioners signing this petition to 145. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions, the Honourable Member for Markham, Unionville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have two petitions, one signed by 75 people, the other signed by 550 people. All petitioners call upon Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to defend the freedom of conscious thought and belief and withdraw attestation requirement by the applicants to Canada Summer Job Program. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Pending petitions, the honourable member for Calgary-Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, I am proud today to table a petition signed by Canadians who oppose the Liberal government's application of a values test to the 2017 Canada Summer Jobs Program. These individuals ask the Prime Minister to uphold the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which protects our right to freedom of conscience, thought and belief, and withdraw the attestation requirement for this government program. Thank you.
Pending petition, the honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise today to present a petition, e-petition E1311, signed by hundreds of Canadians. They point out that cancer treatment centres and major medical and recuperative centres are located in densely populated cities across Canada, and people from rural areas have to make long-distance travel to those centres for their care. They often incur crippling travel costs, and this affects more than half of all Canadians. And they point out that while travel costs are deductible, medical travel costs are deductible, but they are only deductible in the year that they're incurred. And these people are seriously ill, hurt. They are not working in that year or working very little. And so they point out that you cannot deduct these costs during that year. They ask the government, therefore, to allow medical travel costs incurred in Canada to be deductible against all future taxes payable.
Pending petitions, the honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise on a day when there are some hardworking advocates for the RCMP on the Hill to present a petition signed by thousands of RCMP members, their family members, friends, and concerned Canadians who want the government to address pay issues within the RCMP and support collective bargaining to address a number of long-standing issues that continue to be extant around understaffing, around a lack of good equipment for RCMP members that they need to do their job, and support for their spouses who often have trouble finding work as their partner moves across the country doing that work, and a number of other issues, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to bring those issues to the government's attention on their behalf. Thank you.
Presenting petition, the honourable member for Fleetwood, Port Kells.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every day, over 130 million girls around the world are not in school. In Canada, we know that education is key to individual and community prosperity and well-being. And I'm very pleased on behalf of the One campaign, which is here in Ottawa right now, to present this petition to government to mobilize our support to better fund girls' education internationally. As our Budget 2018 demonstrates, we believe that when women do better, we all do better. And that principle applies not just here at home, but globally. The One campaign wants Canada to support that principle around the world.
Presenting petitions, the honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. What a pleasure it is to present yet another petition reflecting the desire of my constituents to see a national pharmacare program. What they're calling on the government and the Prime Minister to do is to look at ways in which we could work with the different levels of government and put into place and incorporate a national pharmacare program into the Canada Health Act, really encouraged the other day with the national budget, which I think is a good step towards that direction. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Presenting petitions. Questions on the order paper. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask that all questions be allowed to stand at this time, please.
Is it agreed? Agreed. Orders of the day. Oh, I'm sorry. We have a point of order. The Honourable Member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm actually rising under Standing Order Section 48.2 on a question of privilege, and notice of which was given this morning in accordance with the standing orders. I would ask you, Mr. Speaker, after my brief remarks, to make a prima facie finding of a breach of my parliamentary privilege and refer the matter immediately, because of the time-sensitive nature of the breach, to the House of Commons Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. The breach of my parliamentary procedure relates both to my individual rights as a Member of Parliament, to my rights as the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs, and as well, Mr. Speaker, I'll highlight why I think also there's collective breach of the rights of all members of this House of Commons, because as I'm sure you know, Mr. Speaker, there are individual rights that each Member of Parliament has, regardless of side of this House, as well as collective rights that all 338 members and yourself, Mr. Speaker, have. These are founded within the Constitution Act of 1867, as well as within the rules of this place and several generations of decisions from the chair. And I'll reference the most recent one that is germane to this request. At the heart of the issue of parliamentary privilege of a Member of Parliament is for the Member of Parliament to be fully able to deliberate, debate, legislate, and most importantly, Mr. Speaker, especially for members of the opposition, to hold the government to account. That is at the heart of our parliamentary democracy, and it has been impeded. Anything that impedes my ability to fill my functions is a breach of my privilege. Specifically, that breach was highlighted yesterday by the Minister of Public Safety, who acknowledged that confidential information related to the Prime Minister's trip to India was shared with members of the press gallery, who don't sit in this place but maybe above it or observe it, Mr. Speaker. And that same information is not being shared with me as a Member of Parliament. Furthermore, our ability to question the National Security Advisor, Mr. Jean, who shared that information with members of the press gallery, is not able to appear before a committee of this place, Mr. Speaker, or a committee for the upper house, further stymieing our ability to fulfill our requirements and obligations as Member of Parliament to hold the government to account, Mr. Speaker. I will highlight this specifically because yesterday when the Minister of Public Safety, to many journalists, including one of the journalists that was briefed by the National Security Advisor, he suggested that the National Security Advisor could share information that he deemed to be confidential with reporters, but the Minister of Public Safety was not willing to share that same information to members of this House of Commons. And that in itself, Mr. Speaker, is a prima facie breach of my privilege as a Member of Parliament. As I've said, these rights have been adjudicated on by various chairs since the founding of our Confederation. It inhibits, as an individual, my ability to have freedom of speech and information to inform and color my deliberations and debates in this House, Mr. Speaker. As well, there's also a critical individual freedom members of Parliament have, and that is the freedom from obstruction or interference in the fulfillment of my duties. Not only as a Member of Parliament who has a background in defence, security, and these affairs, Mr. Speaker, I have additional duties to hold the Minister of Foreign Affairs to account with respect to Canada's role in the world and our diplomatic function. In the last week, Mr. Speaker, this chamber's been seized with the largest diplomatic incident Canada has witnessed in a generation. And the Minister of Public Safety yesterday acknowledged that information relating to the government, and in particular the Prime Minister's specific allegations or claims that a partner, the Indian government, is somehow involved in this crisis, the Atwal affair it's now named, Mr. Speaker, the diplomatic crisis of a convicted attempted assassin who tried to kill an Indian parliamentarian on Canadian soil, was invited to formal prime ministerial events. That is an external affairs, a foreign affairs crisis, Mr. Speaker. The minister yesterday confirmed that information with respect to the Prime Minister's defense in this House of those claims, information was shared with members of the press gallery who they would know would publish it in their newspapers or online or on television, thereby waiving any confidentiality claims. That same information they're withholding from me as a parliamentarian who is charged with holding them to account, Mr. Speaker. It is astounding and far worse than the judgment from former Speaker Milliken, who I'm going to refer to shortly. Not only does it breach my individual privileges as a member of Parliament in several ways, it is a breach of our collective rights. I'm sure even members of the Liberal caucus who were not on this Indian junket trip, Mr. Speaker, are offended by what happened. And they, as government members, have a right collectively to institute inquiries, call witnesses, and demand information to this chamber. So not only are my individual privileges as a member of Parliament being stymied by the Liberal government, by admission by the Minister of Public Safety, who yesterday said the same information they did share with journalists they're not prepared to share here, that in itself is a prima facie indication that they're violating my privilege. There's also a collective violation inherent in this withholding of information, Mr. Speaker. As I suggested today in question period, often the cover-up can be worse than the crime. Now, I don't think there's a crime here. I'm using that as an expression. But there was a diplomatic incident that has caused Canadians great concern, great international embarrassment, and today, members of the Conservative caucus raised how it's already impacting our pulse farmers, Mr. Speaker. And we're not able, as members of Parliament, to actually have the same degree of information that the Prime Minister's office offered to journalists to try and defend or explain away a crisis with respect to the Atwell affair, Mr. Speaker. I refer you to the seminal case from the Supreme Court of Canada in New Brunswick Broadcasting versus Nova Scotia, where parliamentary privilege must be, I quote, absolute, unquote, and necessary, Mr. Speaker. All of our legislatures and our federal parliament must respect the absolute privilege of its members to be informed, to have debate, deliberations, and to hold the government to account. That is the core of our parliamentary democracy, Mr. Speaker. And suggesting, as I said, the Minister for Public Safety, by suggesting the National Security Advisor was more than capable, or more than, he had the ability to share this information with journalists but not share it with the House. That in itself suggests the information he shared was not confidential. If they're going to, as damage control, Mr. Speaker, share information, clearly it is not information that CSIS was saying, stop, you're jeopardizing our national security. That's why this side of the House feels that the Prime Minister's office engaged the National Security Advisor in a media smokescreen attempt to deflect attention from the Atwell. I'm not sure that's the case, Mr. Speaker, because I'm being stopped from performing my duties as a member of Parliament because the Minister of Public Safety, the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister's office, because we all know it's there, Mr. Speaker, are not sharing the same information they shared with journalists to suggest that they were not to blame for the Atwell affair. I have no ability to see that information. And I'll quote Speaker Milliken on April 28, 2010 in the Afghan document decision, Mr. Speaker, on a similar type issue where confidentiality, national security were part of the debate. I quote, "It is the view of the Chair that accepting an unconditional authority of the Executive to censor the information provided to Parliament would, in fact, jeopardize the very separation of powers that is purported to lie at the heart of our parliamentary system and the independence of its constituent parts." End quote, Mr. Speaker. This chamber, the men and women that stand in this chamber, sit in this chamber, participate in the debates of our nation, are the most important constituent part of our parliamentary system, Mr. Speaker. The chair before you, probably one of the most profound writing speakers, Speaker Milliken, said that specifically when the executive, the Prime Minister's office, suggested confidentiality would prevent parliamentarians from exercising their absolute privileges. This is all four corners of that Speaker's decision apply to this case. And in fact, the Minister of Public Safety, as I raised in question period today, highlighted that breach of privilege yesterday to the media when he confirmed the National Security Advisor, we believe, at the request of the Prime Minister's office, shared information with journalists that they're now preventing us from having over claims of confidentiality, Mr. Speaker. Here's an interesting sidebar, and everyone knows, especially the Deputy House Leader, that I love to look back into the history of things. When the Milliken decision in 2010 came out, the then Liberal leader, Michael Ignatieff, was quite happy with this decision, Mr. Speaker. And Speaker Milliken recommended a compromise because there actually was confidential information here, Mr. Speaker. The waiving of confidentiality by allowing the National Security Advisor to brief the media shows that that's a red herring in this case. But in the Afghan documents case, it was a real concern. So the Speaker's decision recommended a compromise so that the parties could get together and make sure the privilege of MPs was not impeded. Who did Michael Ignatieff charge to work on behalf of the Liberal Party to make sure that privilege was maintained? The House Leader at the time for the Liberal Party. Who was that, Mr. Speaker? The Minister of Public Safety. Sometimes when you hear a long, long time, you've seen everything. So that minister has seen everything. He's seen this. He knows that by not providing us the very same information they've provided journalists, his work on the Milliken decision and the compromise from it shows that the production of documents, the provision of information, and even witnesses to allow a proper deliberation, debate, and holding of government to account is a breach of privilege. That decision dealt with not just production of documents and information to allow for that deliberation, that debate, that holding to account. It also, Mr. Speaker, dealt with the issue of tampering or impeding witnesses from being part of the parliamentary inquiry. So I would refer the chair to the Milliken decision with respect to that as well. That's interesting in this case as well, Mr. Speaker, because the National Security Advisor is a senior civil servant. He was charged to brief the media, thereby suggesting that there was no confidential information they're now claiming can't be shared with us, and Mr. Jean cannot appear before the Public Safety Committee or Committee of the Senate. I suggest any confidentiality or sensitivity of that information was waived. But even if it wasn't, what did Speaker Milliken suggest in the case with a letter from an Associate Deputy Minister with respect to the Afghan documents? He suggested that letter, Mr. Speaker, provided a chilling effect on the civil service, and the ability for Parliament to fulfill its obligation, Mr. Speaker. This is a far worse chilling effect because the National Security Advisor for Canada has never made public statements, particularly quiet, hastily arranged media briefings. This is unprecedented. Even a more senior person than an Associate Deputy Minister, Mr. Speaker. So the chill effect that the Milliken decision was concerned about with respect to impeding, with respect to tampering with the ability for documents and deliberations to take place in this case, also apply here, Mr. Speaker. And unfortunately, unless we get some answers, I feel that the Prime Minister's office has sullied the reputation of a fine 3-decade-long civil servant. Shameful. He should come before committee and confirm, was he acting rogue here, Mr. Speaker? Without the information, I'm not sure, but my hunch is that's not the case. But either way, we don't have the information and my privilege is briefed. I'll end with this, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps I wanted to speak a little bit more before we broke for two weeks, but this is very serious. The only limitations on the privileges of a member of Parliament must be self-imposed. We regulate our debates. My very capable House Leader, on behalf of our parliamentary caucus, works with the Government House Leader and other colleagues to make sure the debate functions, to make sure that we hold one another to account, and the Chair helps us in that exercise, capably informed by the table officers, Mr. Speaker. We determine what information we see, not the Minister of Public Safety. The very fact that he was involved in the Milliken decision compromise tells me he knows that, Mr. Speaker. As well, unelected officials in the Prime Minister's office who determine what civil servants go out and who they brief and what information they share, if they're now trying to impede me from doing my job by not sharing that same information, they must be held to account, Mr. Speaker, because they're not members of this place. We regulate our own debate and our own respect for the privileges of this place. Further, that privilege, and the Milliken decision confirmed this once again, Mr. Speaker, that privilege is not affected by statutes that might prohibit distribution of information. So if there are real confidentialities or national security concerns, which I've said already in my remarks, Mr. Speaker, I don't think that's the case here. That's what the minister is claiming. Disclosure sunshine will show all that. But even if there is sensitive information or confidential documents, that does not impact my privilege to see it. The Milliken decision confirms that accommodations must be made. The Public Safety Committee could meet in camera, Mr. Speaker. The parliamentary House leaders could get together like they did with the Milliken decision, like the Public Safety Minister did in 2010, to make sure that Parliament is supreme, Mr. Speaker. We're not impacted by claims of confidentiality, especially what I'm suggesting, Mr. Speaker, false claims. So, Mr. Speaker, this is a very serious affair. The National Security Advisor of Canada is now implicated, one of Canada's most important allies in Asia-Pacific going forward, one that all sides of this House have taken strong work to try and improve and enhance relationships, enhance trade. Under the Conservatives, two-way trade doubled, Mr. Speaker. That country has now said the Prime Minister's claims are baseless. I can't confirm they're baseless because I'm being impeded in my function, Mr. Speaker. Canada's allies are affected, our reputation are affected, my role as a parliamentarian is affected, all of my collective colleagues in here, their ability to perform their function is affected. This is serious, Mr. Speaker. And given the nature of this affair, I would ask the Chair, relying heavily on the Milliken decision, which is totally on point, when the House returns, you make a decision so that all of us on all sides of this chamber can fulfill our roles as parliamentarians. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair will take. Sorry. Oh, sorry. L'honorable député de.
The honourable member for Berthier-Masquinongé.
Thank the member for Durham for his remarks today in the House of Commons. Very, very timely, but he's raised some very important issues. We have deep concerns. This whole thing has blown up and moved very quickly. We are very concerned about the breach of privilege and respecting members' rights in the House of Commons, making sure that we can do our job adequately on behalf of the people that we represent. So I am hoping to reserve some time to reflect deeply and come back to the House as soon as we resume work on Monday. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We always respect our civil service and the fine work that they do. The Prime Minister and the Minister of Public Safety have been actually very clear on the issue, but much like the New Democratic House Leader, we will take into consideration everything that my friend across the way has put on the record today and provide a comment once we get back into session after the constituency break week.
L'honorable député de Joliette.
The honourable member for Joliette. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to support what my colleague, the member for Durham, said. I think this question of privilege is fundamental, and it's unacceptable that a minister or the executive give the media information while we are not informed. You're there to defend our privilege, our rights, and I'm counting on you. And thus, I support what my colleague, the member for Durham, has had to say.
We'll take this under advisement and return in a timely manner. Okay. Orders of the day.
Government bills, Commons. Consideration at second reading of the Act of the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulator Act.
The honourable member for Winnipeg North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And you know, we have a government that has recognized the importance of working and putting in place legislation that will, in fact, have a positive difference in dealing with Canada's environment, in dealing with our energy sector, along with, in consideration, our Indigenous people. I believe that this legislation is a very strong step forward. And I think it's reinforced, at least in good part, when you have the Conservatives on the one hand saying that that we have gone too far, and then the New Democrats saying that we haven't gone far enough. We recognize in the government that you can, in fact, move forward on energy, taking into consideration the environment and the consultations that are required. And that's one of the reasons why we were able to do something that the Conservatives failed at doing while they were in government for 10 years, such as getting a pipeline approved. My question to the member is, would he not at the very least recognize that Canadians have an expectation that we bring forward legislation of this nature?
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jean-Cartier. I would like to thank my excellent colleague for his question. The people for Winnipeg North are well represented because he rises often in the House. Now, talking a lot doesn't mean that we're working up to snuff. We are all here on the opposition side with the intention and the will to move the environmental movement forward in the sense that we want to protect our planet every single day. Now, when you say, dear colleague, that the Conservatives have said you're going too far, I would respond something very simple, something very clear. The NDP accuse you of not going far enough. You accuse us of telling you that we tell you go too far, but I would say that you're going nowhere.
Questions et commentaires. Questions and comments. The honourable member for South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to continue along in that line and perhaps ask the member who gave the speech where he thinks this bill fails. I think the Minister of Natural Resources gets up almost weekly, it used to be daily, and says that he has restored the confidence of Canadians in the energy regulatory system, and yet Nanos Research came out with a poll a couple months ago that showed that only 2% of Canadians had confidence in the regulatory system, and that had been steadily dropping since the Harper days. People think, they try to say that they've restored confidence, but instead confidence continues to erode. And I just wondered if you could comment on that and whether he thinks that this bill will do anything to restore that confidence.
Le député de Portneuf-Jean-Cartier.
The honourable member for Portneuf-Jean-Cartier. I would like to thank my colleague for South Okanagan, West Kootenay. I agree somewhat with him. The public's trust is not there since this government has taken power. The public is losing trust in institutions and measures being taken in order to improve our environment. Dear colleagues, there's an article in the development by Alexandre that confirms what I was saying. One thing is certain, the federal government promises it will reestablish public trust, make decisions based on science and evidence and Indigenous knowledge while respecting Indigenous rights. That is what the Minister for the Environment, Catherine McKenna, said. The article appeared on February 9th. Now we have to understand what follows in the article. I insist on the fact that the government will certainly decide in favor of the natural interest. The government will consult scientists, consult Indigenous people. We will give them the illusion that they are a part of the process. However, the minister, according to her mood, according to her link with the Liberal Party and project developers who will determine if the project will go forward or if it will be stopped. That is unacceptable. So when it comes to public trust, dear colleagues, I will say that I have a real problem with the attitude of the current government. Let us work together to find measures to ensure that we develop our environment intelligently, sustainable development with economic development in harmony with each other, and that we be smart about it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Resuming debate.
Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Before beginning, I wish to inform you that I will be splitting my time with the member from Repentigny. I'm very pleased to join this important debate. Bill C-69 is a generational opportunity to realize the full promise of Canada through the resources of our land and the resourcefulness of Canadians. It's an opportunity to achieve a lasting balance. This is not easy, and this debate is most timely and most important. We are at a pivotal moment. Climate change is the great challenge of our generation. The natural environment signals this to us, of course. It also plays a critical role in assisting us to manage climate change, and it will be the measure of the balance we achieve. Of course, the natural environment restores us in our daily lives. Our ingenuity and investment in clean technology and innovation are fundamental to the way forward as we continue to build success in the natural resources sector. As we debate this bill, a new wave of resource development is before us, with more than $650 billion worth of projects either under construction or planned over the next 10 years. This is not insignificant. This means good, sustainable jobs and new economic opportunities for the middle class. So, it is imperative that we have a modern environmental and regulatory system, one that is open, transparent, and effective. A process that views public engagement as an asset, critical toward earning public confidence in government decision-making. This is what Bill C-69 achieves. It is based upon better, clearer rules in order to recognize and achieve greater protection of the environment, fish, and waterways, the centrality and importance of positive relations between Canada and Indigenous peoples, collaboration between the federal government and the provinces and territories, more investment in Canada's natural resource sector, and finally, the importance of earning every day the public trust. Bill C-69 strives to integrate Canada's economic and environmental goals, to advance Indigenous reconciliation, and to ensure that worthy projects go ahead in an environmentally sustainable manner. This cannot be accomplished on our own. We can work together better. The provinces and territories are key regulators. Indigenous peoples are central to Canada's economic development, and project proponents make key investments in our innovation economy. Bill C-69 anticipates and accommodates multiple players and multiple imperatives. It's an integrative bill that will provide a strong foundation for decision-making. Beginning with a commitment to the fundamental principle of one project, one assessment for major resource projects, Bill C-69 creates the way in which all parties are part of one process. Industry is asking for environmental processes that are timely and rooted in science, and regulatory reviews that are efficient and offer greater certainty. The general public and Indigenous communities are asking for early and meaningful engagement to identify priorities. All of this will be coordinated by the new Impact Assessment Agency. Canadians are right to expect that impact assessments consider more than environmental impacts. This has been a long-standing criticism of the previous approach, and we should be proud of sustainability advocates from coast to coast to coast. Bill C-69 proposes that major new resource projects be viewed in the wider context of economic, social, and health impacts of ongoing development, as well as environmental impacts. Also, Bill C-69 expands the opportunities for Canadians to participate in the process, improving public funding for citizens to do so, and communicating our own efforts and decisions in language that is easy to understand and readily available. Thirdly, Bill C-69 will help to renew and improve Canada's relationships with Indigenous peoples, supporting new partnerships by improving the consultation process and ensuring clear accountabilities between Indigenous peoples and the Crown. Finally, Bill C-69 will enhance how science and data are weighed and how this contributes to a decision. We believe that Bill C-69 responds directly to the reasonable expectation on the part of the general public that policy making should incorporate input from thorough public consultation, expert reviews, parliamentary studies, and open deliberation. Bill C-69 is about environmental assessments and regulatory reviews that make resource development better and more sustainable. Our proposals for modernizing the National Energy Board build on this. Under the Canadian Energy Regulator Act, the NEB would be replaced by a new federal energy regulator that will remain headquartered in Calgary, where it belongs. The new federal regulator will be based on the principles of modern, effective governance, more inclusive public engagement, greater Indigenous participation, stronger safety and environmental protections, and more timely decisions. The modern regulator would reflect Canada's changing energy needs and desires with an expanded mandate to review traditional and renewable sources of energy, including offshore, wind, and tidal. It will have the required independence and the proper accountability for our clean growth energy future in the 21st century. Drawing upon the best energy data and the latest trends to inform its decisions, the new regulator will operate with shorter timelines for project reviews. For major new energy projects, the proposed Canadian Energy Regulator will collaborate with the new Impact Assessment Agency to provide its own recommendations in a single final report. For all other projects, the new Federal Energy Regulator will retain its existing responsibility to review. Ultimately, our goal is to ensure that sound resource projects be built. We believe that this calls for a modern environmental and regulatory system that promotes common values and ensures shared benefits. Canada can achieve the public good by ensuring that projects are built in a responsible, timely, and transparent way, creating good jobs and a stronger middle class. We are rising to the challenges of our times by driving economic growth, building investment certainty, advancing Indigenous reconciliation, and achieving sustainable solutions. We are restoring public confidence and combating climate change. We are creating inclusive prosperity. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to support this legislation, and I hope all members will join our government in approving better rules to build a better Canada. Thank you very much.
Questions and comments. The honourable member from South Okanagan, West Kootenay.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's good to see a Newfoundlander in the chair. Now you have both places in this building sewn up, it appears. I just wanted to ask the member through you about public confidence in the energy regulation system. As you know, this bill, part of this bill, the one small part, it deals with pipelines and through the new Canada Energy Regulator. And we had a situation in the Kinder Morgan decision where they had a ministerial panel travel along the length of the pipeline, and that panel came up with 6 questions that it said the government should answer before approving or not approving the pipeline. And the first 3 were, you know, how do you square this with climate action? How do you do this without a comprehensive national energy strategy? And how do you square it with UNDRIP? And I'm just wondering if she can comment on the fact that most environmental lawyers across this country says none of these questions were answered before Kinder Morgan was approved, and none of them are answered in this legislation.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary, the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to put today's debate in a broader context. When we formed government, it was very clear that there was a lack of confidence in the National Energy Board. There was a lack of confidence in the Canadian Environmental Assessment Act. There was a lack of confidence in the Navigable Waters Act. There was a lack of confidence in the Fisheries Act. These had been shaken dramatically by the previous government. And so we put an interim process in place to be consultative, to be more inclusive of Indigenous views, to add conditions to ensure that these projects could go forward because they were really a long way along in their entire, in terms of making a final decision. Then we took 14 months to consult coast to coast to coast and to bring together and integrate multiple players, multiple imperatives in order that our decisions with regard to the natural resources sector are rooted in engagement, in environmental protections, and Indigenous reconciliation. Thank you.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister of the Environment has stated that one of the objectives of Bill C-69 is to increase investor confidence. Now, I would ask the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to square that statement with the fact that the Minister of the Environment at the planning stage has the ability to kill a major energy project before any economic analysis is done, before any environmental analysis is done, before any scientific analysis is done. In other words, the minister can kill a pipeline project on the basis of a purely political decision. Could the parliamentary secretary explain just how that increases investor confidence?
The parliamentary secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It doesn't surprise me that the member opposite doesn't value the importance of early public engagement and early engagement with Indigenous peoples. That is a fundamental commitment of our government, and that is what will allow us to not be surprised, to not be responsible for excluding important voices, and to begin these discussions on a strong foundation. Thank you.
The honourable member for, who is writing, I just forgot, I apologize. Hastings, Lennox, Addington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank my colleague for her great speech. I wanted to ask her, our government, one of the primary focuses of our government has been in achieving the balance between the environment and the economy going together. I wonder if the member could please expand on how C-69 will help us to accomplish that balance. Thank you.
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Trade.
Thank you very much. Firstly, the the Impact Assessment Act replaces the previous act by bringing together multiple interests and multiple impacts. So any environmental decision, any decision that's good for our economy, any decision that's good for our society and public health must be one decision, and we must share how we get to that endpoint across multiple interests, including provincial and territorial interests, including Indigenous interests, and including the general public. We don't see the environment and the economy as at all mutually exclusive. We see the best long-term interests being made with a view to sustainability. Thank you.
Resuming debates. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-69 has some interesting aspects, but it raises questions and does not go in the right direction at all for Quebec. For example, the government wants to put science back at the heart of environmental decisions, and that's perfect, especially after the Harper government where science was the enemy. Obviously, this is a real improvement. It demonstrates a certain willingness to defend the environment. But as always with the Liberals, intentions are more like speaking points than anything else and mean nothing as long as they are not clearly part of legislation. I'll give you an example. The promise for electoral reform, which was abandoned, or the promise to defend supply management no matter what. But they did not want to renegotiate the Trans-Pacific Partnership to defend our farmers. The government, for example, did not revise its greenhouse gas reduction objectives. It just took the ones of the Conservatives, which are well below what is necessary for the planet and what other countries set as targets. I can't cover everything in 10 minutes, but I can raise a few important points. This bill, in its current form, is going in the opposite direction of where it should for Quebec's men and women. I firmly believe that instead of imposing its standards onto Quebec, it should be the other way around. It should be up to Quebecers to decide how to manage their territory, how to protect the environment. It is for that reason that I tabled Bill C-392, which goes in the opposite direction of C-69. Our vision is very simple. What happens where we live has to go through us first. And we firmly believe that citizens must have their say on projects that could have a negative impact on their health and on the environment. And of course, I have in mind Energy East. The federal government is subject to pressure from businesses that have interests in these projects, and the government has to balance interests that are often divergent from one province to the next. Again, then, I'm thinking of Quebec's interests versus the interests of oil-producing projects, but I'm also thinking about British Columbia, which is in conflict with Alberta, about Trans Mountain.
In both cases, one province is taking on all the risks and getting no benefit, while the other one gets all the benefit without taking on any of the risks. It's unfair that citizens should have to suffer the consequences of this. I'll give you another example, Mr. Speaker. In 2016, there was a private company called IMTT Incorporated, which set up shop in Quebec and was polluting the neighborhood of Limoilou near Quebec City with a red powder. People saw this red powder on their balconies and in their laundry. Why? Well, because they were in the Quebec court, and then the Superior Court of Quebec said, oh, well, this is federal jurisdiction, so our environmental protection law doesn't apply. Of course, that's ridiculous, because polluted air affects everyone in the area, and it affects their health. The health of our relatives and children is at stake, Mr. Speaker. This is not just a technical an administrative technicality. So it's simple. The provinces have the expertise here. Quebec should be managing its health services. Quebec is bearing the consequences of pollution, and its citizens are suffering the consequences of pollution. That's why Quebec should have the last word. With Bill C-69, exactly the opposite is happening. The federal government always has the last word. Even if a project was rejected by the BAP, the Quebec Office of Public Hearings for the Environment, well, then the new Impact Assessment Agency of Canada and the Minister of the Environment would still be able to reject the conclusions of our experts and approve a project anyway. And what would their excuse be? The national interest. Perhaps, Mr. Speaker, you will find that this is vague, as I do. It doesn't really mean anything, and it can be invoked for anything, for any type of project. National interest for us means the health and safety of our citizens. And yet, for the Liberals, it seems to be more company profit that matters. The government is able to decide or to make decisions based on its interests and the interests of its friends. I'm not the only one to be concerned about the arbitrary nature of this bill. Greenpeace, for example, told me about their concerns about the assessment criteria to be used by the government. They are too vague. This is the essence of the problem, Mr. Speaker. An agency is being created, but it won't actually serve any purpose because the minister has the final word and can bypass any decision. With C-69, the government is claiming to find a solution to existing problems, but it seems that with a bit of lobbying from a rich company, projects that pollute and destroy our environment will be able to go forward anyway. The bill focuses a lot on public consultation and consultation with scientists and Indigenous peoples, but the minister will be able to approve a project even if everyone is against it. And even if everyone in Quebec is against it, the minister will still be able to go forward by invoking this so-called public or national interest. The bill also removed, or rather missed, the opportunity to remove a provision in the law that would submit Hydro-Quebec to Ottawa as well. In the current law, Hydro-Quebec has to submit to the National Energy Board if it wants to build international and interprovincial lines, and Hydro-Quebec also needs to have a permit to export electricity. And the Canadian government reserves the right to prevent Quebec from exporting its electricity surpluses. The future Canadian Energy Commission will approve having Quebec export this after having considered the consequences on the provinces and having verified whether anyone else is interested in this electricity and if Hydro-Quebec made an effort to offer its electricity to buyers in Canada. Ottawa would also reserve the right to refuse the request for other reasons. Essentially, Hydro-Quebec is under federal control. Now, the government has never misused this law in the past, but it could decide to do so and to harm Quebec. The minister would have been able to use this reform to withdraw these provisions, but unfortunately, she didn't do so. In conclusion, this bill is doing exactly the opposite of what it should be doing. And it's not helping Quebecers. By seizing the right to approve any project, regardless of the agency's evaluation, the minister is cancelling out any positive effects that this bill might have. Projects like Energy East, for example, might be rammed down Quebecers' throats without them having any ability to resist, and that's unacceptable. Quebec has expertise, and Quebec is taking on the risks, and so we should listen to Quebec's will. What happens in Quebec needs to go through us first. The government hasn't even changed its greenhouse gas reduction targets, which are the same as they were under the Harper government. So for us, this bill is really an empty husk. That is why we will be voting against this bill. And I invite all of my colleagues to vote in favor of my bill, Bill C-392, which would allow Quebec and the other provinces to have their voices heard when it comes to projects that might have an environmental impact on their territory and their citizens. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Question et commentaire?
Questions and comments?
Peg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, as we get closer to the wind-up of this particular debate, I want to make sure that we're really clear on the fact that as the government, we recognize that in dealing with getting energy to the markets, that a responsible government ensures that there is an environmental process. And this legislation, in good part, deals with that. And I think this is something in which Canadians as a whole want to see. A progressive government that takes the environment seriously, therefore bringing in legislation of this nature, which establishes a process in which I believe that Canadians would actually welcome. And my question to the member is, in going through second reading, does she have any thoughts in regards to possible specific amendments to the legislation?
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to my colleague. For us, the problem is, and I won't hide this, the problem is federalism. The federal government always seems to take precedence over provincial law, and that's the problem. I'll give you an example, a very concrete one. Let's talk about Drummondville. Let's talk about a foundry in Saint-Germain that went bankrupt. But the federal government, for some reason, had control over the land that had been contaminated. But federal laws are less restrictive than Quebec laws. So what was the result? Well, Quebec companies that had applied to decontaminate it would have cost more for them, so they didn't get the contract. Because our laws are stricter, and federal laws are more lax, and so yes, the land was decontaminated, but we will never be able to use it because of our laws, those lands are still considered contaminated. So the problem is that the federal government is taking precedence over our environmental protection acts.
Question et commentaire.
Questions and comments?
Member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question to my colleague from Repentigny. During her speech, she alluded to the fact that the minister could, on a whim, essentially approve or veto a pipeline project. And that seems to be part of a problem, inasmuch as Bill C-69 is a framework, but what it is lacking is rules that would apply consistently to all major pipeline projects, creating uncertainty and a whole host of other issues. I was wondering if the honourable member could comment on that.
The honourable member for Repentigny. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for having asked that question. Now, essentially what it does is focus on the minister's veto. And that's really what's important in this bill, that regardless of all of the rules or municipal regulations that might exist, regardless of what people think, it will always be the minister who will have the decision-making power, and that veto is unacceptable. Questions and comments? The honourable member for Trois-Rivières. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, her analysis of C-69 was done through the lens of her own bill, and I hope I will have an opportunity to speak about that one, because it does raise some interesting points. But let's get back to the essence of Bill C-69. At the beginning of her speech, she applauded the fact that the Liberal government had left more room for scientists' opinions. But what we saw with the Conservatives before, and what we still see with the Liberals, is that more and more power is being given to ministers. And in this case, even though they are leaving more room for scientific evidence, the minister can still wave her magic wand and make the decision. So is there not a bit of a contradiction between the stated objectives and reality here? The honourable member. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague. I completely agree with his concerns. There are positive aspects in this bill. For example, we need to deal with agencies that have some environmental experience, that there are many points of view that will be taken into consideration, that there will be public consultation. And we've already had an organization that does this in Quebec. It's called the BAP. But the minister still has a veto, and that is unacceptable.
Okay, resuming debates. The honourable member from Sturgeon River Parklands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Bill C-69, the latest monstrosity to come out of this Liberal government, a bill that will cripple Canada's energy industry and eliminate tens of thousands of good-paying jobs across communities in Canada, particularly in my home province of Alberta. This entire process is yet another concession made by this Liberal government to radical environmental groups who will not stop until Canada's oil and gas industry is eliminated. I reject the argument that Canada's National Energy Board was not capable of making independent decisions based upon critical public evidence and public interest. Canada's environmental assessment process is among the best in the world because for generations, Canadians have placed a high emphasis on environmental stewardship and responsible energy development. This symbiotic relationship has allowed Canada to be innovative with environmental regulations and solutions. The benefits of our energy industry, as regulated under the National Energy Board, has resulted in hundreds of billions in investments, tax revenues, jobs, and long-term prosperity in our country. And this new Liberal environmental review process threatens that foundation and our long-term prosperity. In fact, we're already seeing that happen today. Our oil prices have doubled over the past year, and yet Bloomberg reports that in 2017, foreign direct investment has dropped by 27%. And this is primarily due to the toxic political environment that has scared away investment from Canada's energy sector. The always shifting goalposts of the Liberals' social license requirements are dictated by a United States-funded radical environmental lobby, and they are not acting in our country's interests, they are acting in their own self-interest.
While Canada appears to have been assigned the role of a national park for the enjoyment of Americans, the United States has pushed forward with groundbreaking LNG projects and a rapidly expanding export market for shale petroleum. Canada is a hostage to American interest, and as our lifeblood flows down into America at a dramatic discount, only to be repackaged on American tankers at a premium market price. Canadians are doing the work, and we are letting Americans get all the profits. We live in an age of globalization, and our decisions do affect our neighbors. However, the Liberals have gone too far, and I believe that other countries that have the right to interfere in energy regulation. Can you imagine if Americans or Chinese or Russians entertaining delegations from Canada to oppose their energy development? Never. And yet this Liberal government has eliminated the standing test, which allows only for those with a direct connection to the project to have a say. Allowing foreign citizens and foreign interests to influence our energy industry policies and whether or not our regulators will allow infrastructure to be built is an attack on Canadian sovereignty. In closing, Bill C-69 undermines our nation. It will consign us to the status of a national park for the enjoyment of people around the world to the detriment of Canadian citizens. People who need jobs and the prosperity and stability that is created by our responsible energy sector. It's time for the Liberals to go back to the drawing board and create policies and regulations that will actually get shovels in the ground so that our critical LNG and pipeline projects can get the support they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Comme il est 13h15.
It being 1:15 p.m., pursuant to an order adopted on Tuesday, February 27th, 2018, it's my duty to interrupt the proceedings and put forthwith every question necessary to dispose of the second reading stage of the bill now before the House. The question is as follows.
Anna, seconded by Ms. Qualtrough, moved that Bill C-69 enact the Impact Assessment Act and Canadian Energy Regulator Act to amend the Navigation Protection Act and to make consequential amendments to other acts be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Environment and Sustainable Development. Conformément à l'article 60.
Pursuant to Standing Order 69.1, the first question is on Part 1, regarding the Impact Assessment Act, Part 2, regarding the Canadian Energy Regulator Act, the title, preamble, schedule, and all clauses in Part 4, except clauses 85, 186, 187, and 195.
House to adopt these elements of the bill. All those in favor, please say yay. Yay! All those opposed, please say nay. Nay! In my opinion, the yeas have it. The recorded division of these elements, bills stands deferred. The next question is on Part 3, regarding the Navigation Protection Act and clauses 85, 186, 187, and 195 of Part 4. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt these elements of the bill? Yes. All those in favor, please say yay. Yay! All those opposed, please say nay. Nay! In my opinion, the yeas have it. The recorded division on these elements of the bill stand deferred. Normally at this time, the House would proceed to taking of the deferred recorded division at the report stage of the bill. However, pursuant to Standing Order 45, the recorded divisions stand deferred until Monday, March 19th, 2018, at the ordinary hour of daily adjournment. Orders of the day? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, I suspect if you were to canvass the House, you'd find unanimous consent to call it 1:30 at this time so we can begin private members' hour.
Do we have unanimous consent of the House? I believe we have it. Be it seen as 1:30. Okay. The House will now proceed to the consideration of private members' business as listed on today's order paper.
Private members'
Orders
business.
of the day.
Private members' business. Consideration at second reading of Bill 375, an act to amend the Criminal Code pre-sentence report, standing in the name of Mr. Johari.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Durham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And it's been a good debate here on a Friday, and I appreciate your time earlier with respect to my point of privilege. But I'm rising now to speak on behalf of the Conservative Party with respect to Bill 375, brought by the MP, Liberal MP from Richmond Hill, with respect to amending the Criminal Code. It's a short bill because it's really trying to insert one element into the pre-sentence report. I'll speak for a few moments about the intention, from what I can find, of this bill, and then some of the concerns we have with it, essentially because it's vague and causes us some concern that I'll get into, Mr. Speaker. Specifically, its goal is to amend the pre-sentencing report prepared under the auspices of the Criminal Code under Section 721(3). It wants to insert a new provision, a new ground for the pre-sentencing report. That would be at A1, any mental disorder from which the offender suffers, as well as any mental health care programming available to them. The MP from Richmond Hill, with respect to introducing this bill, has said that he wants it to include information on families with histories of mental illness to ensure that they're afforded care. And the afforded care aspect of this, Mr. Speaker, I think we all agree with. Mental health conditions and mental health conditions that may be involved in someone's criminal behavior are serious, but also there must be compassion there. So certainly there's compassion with respect to treatment and making healthcare programs available and that sort of thing. Generally, our criminal justice system does that. You could suggest, and the various prisoners' ombudsmen and things like that have highlighted that we don't have enough mental health resources within our criminal justice system. But this bill isn't about that. It's about basically just highlighting mental health programming. Agree with that, Mr. Speaker. That is reasonable. It's already being done now. Perhaps it's not being done well enough, but this bill wants to insert that availability into the pre-sentence report. That availability, if the person is sentenced, actually comes later, but that's the part of this private member's bill we generally feel that we're in line with. The trouble with the bill is because it's vague, maybe intentionally so, it seems like mental health might be an aspect of every sentencing decision that a judge is looking at in a criminal court context. Because it's really only a one-line bill, it's hard for us to determine. There hasn't been much public discussion on this to determine if that's the case. And that concerns me, Mr. Speaker. I'll get into my remarks why shortly. Right now, what is in the pre-sentencing report now, Mr. Speaker, under Section 721(3) of the Criminal Code? Age, character, maturity, history, including criminal history, the remorse or willingness to make amends. These sorts of things are the typical aspects that go into a pre-sentencing report that a judge will consider before rendering or giving a sentence after a finding of guilt, Mr. Speaker. The reference to mental health in a vague sense here, any mental health disorder from which the offender suffers, doesn't actually go to intent, Mr. Speaker, or mens rea, actus reus, the sort of fundamentals of criminal law. Was there a guilty mind? Was there a guilty act? Is the member from Richmond Hill suggesting that even property crimes or things like this should consider all mental health aspects? It's not clear enough, because certainly if someone was depressed, that wouldn't necessarily say they didn't understand, they didn't have the mens rea to commit a theft. What's worse, Mr. Speaker, is when we start getting into crimes against other people, how does this relate to the mental health impacting a decision when violence, for example, is committed against another citizen? So this is why we have some concerns with it being vague. Is its intention to make this a requirement for consideration in all aspects of mental health, or is it meant to be part of the general discussion on not criminally responsible due to mental disorder, Mr. Speaker? That's already firmly established. And I'll talk about that in a moment. I always try and remind people when we talk about criminal justice issues, rehabilitation, treatment, all those things are very, very important, Mr. Speaker, and they have a place in our criminal justice system. What often is the difference in this House of Commons is the Liberals or the NDP put rehabilitation of the offender always first, and in some cases the only consideration with respect to sentencing and their incarceration, Mr. Speaker. Whereas I find the Conservatives look at all aspects of the principles of sentencing an offender. Remember, Mr. Speaker, this is after a finding of guilt, regardless of what the underlying criminal code provision is. And I refer the member and anyone following this debate to Section 718 of the Criminal Code, which is our principles of sentencing. This is something we learn in law school, Mr. Speaker, because it's kind of the foundation of our criminal justice system. And as I said, while some people, advocates, people on the left, talk almost exclusively about rehabilitation, what are the principles of sentencing? What are the foundations of our criminal justice system? Well, I'll read them out, Mr. Speaker. The first is denunciation of unlawful conduct. The second is deterrence. The third is the separation of the offender. Protection of society, that one. The fourth is the assistance in the rehabilitation of the offender. That's the rehabilitation aspect. Fifth is reparations for criminal conduct on society or in some cases the victim, Mr. Speaker. And finally, the last principle of sentencing in our criminal code is the promotion of a sense of responsibility. I think that final one is probably the most important, alongside protection of the public, in cases where there's violence, Mr. Speaker. Certainly in cases where there's no violence, rehabilitation should probably be a priority, key priority, especially for young people. And our system has that already. But when we do talk about cases that involve violence, that's when we think protection of the public, denunciation of conduct, promotion of the sense of responsibility, deterrence, all those other factors should take priority. And I think average Canadians agree with that, Mr. Speaker. So what's not clear about this bill is how it relates to capacity decisions of an offender, Mr. Speaker. In pre-sentencing, is any mental health condition just part of not criminally responsible discussion because there's already provision for that, or is it just meant to be a consideration for later treatment? Because in this bill, treatment and consideration of historical conditions, and we see a lot of talk in society today now about trauma being intergenerational. So is intergenerational trauma somehow a consideration at pre-sentencing, meaning somebody should not receive a sentence appropriate because of trauma committed in the past? When there's a very light, vague bill, it's not clear for us to understand. We already have a not criminally responsible provision for mental disorder, Mr. Speaker, where somebody does not have the capacity to understand the mens reis, the mental intention of their act. They committed the act. The actus reus is the one part of a criminal act, and the mens rea, the mental intention, is the other. We already have not criminal responsibility, Mr. Speaker. And the Winco decision in 1999, the Supreme Court said that within that construct, if there's not capacity, security of the public, if the offender is violent, is still a key priority. We talk about this often, Mr. Speaker, because there's cases like the Shornborn case in Merritt, BC, where the public loses faith in the criminal justice system because they see NCR cases not putting protection of the public and other aspects of sentencing of criminal sentencing principles applied. We know the Vincent Lee case in Manitoba, others. These erode public confidence in our system. So what our concern from the Conservative Party, because this bill is so vague, if this was just about making sure that treatment options are discussed while the person is incarcerated or serving a conditional sentence or something, or that's one thing. But the consideration of historic mental illness, the sort of vague notion, because we don't want to see a situation where there's a violent crime committed and the history of intergenerational trauma or depression would somehow be an excuse for the mens rea. Mental health conditions often will mean people do have the capacity. I talk about veterans and mental health all the time. It's an injury in some cases, Mr. Speaker, but that person still has the capacity. So the MP from Richmond Hill has to shed a little more light on this to address these reasonable concerns.
Reprise du débat, resuming debate. Honorable député de...
The Honourable Member for Saint-Hyacinthe-Barrette. Mr. Speaker, I rise to address Bill C-375, which amends the Criminal Code in order to introduce information concerning mental issues and pre-sentence reports. We want compassion and readaptation to be part of our policy, and this is why, Mr. Speaker, all of my colleagues in the NDP and myself support this bill, which we think is necessary for effective and fair sentencing. We believe that this bill goes in the right direction because it would allow judges to have available all information necessary to come to a just and fair sentence. More than 36% of delinquents need psychological or psychiatric follow-up. And in the criminal code, it only requires that this information needs to be in the pre-sentence report: age, degree of maturity, character, and behavior of the delinquent, and his or her desire to make good the wrong they've created. At this time, people suffering from mental illnesses are overrepresented in our criminal justice system, so it would be judicious to bear in mind problems, mental issues in pre-sentence reports in order that judges can make decisions that are more just and more appropriate. All of this represents a real opportunity to modernize our justice system and to adapt it to this situation. Nevertheless, not everything is perfect in Bill C-375. My colleagues in the NDP and myself personally feel that this bill lacks ambition and doesn't go far enough. We really need to act on the accessibility file. The budget Tuesday would have been a fine opportunity to invest in this area, but no. We believe that mental health care should also be accessible and widespread as other health services in our communities. If we're to be logical and have a view to equality, illness, which affects one's spirit and mind, should be as important and get comparable resources, comparable to the funding that is given to physical illness. We want to avoid, of course, excessive criminalization by having young people and anyone else in jail if it's not necessary. This is why it's time for the government to invest in programs that would truly help people suffering from mental illness. According to the Mental Health Board of Canada, more than 1 million children and adolescents in Canada have mental illnesses, and yet fewer than 20% of them can get the treatment they need. This is why during the last election campaign, the NDP committed to creating an innovation fund for mental health for young people, and it would give special attention to First Nations communities and to isolated and rural communities. This innovation fund, Mr. Speaker, would be a real means of fighting against crime among people who have mental illness. I believe our way of rethinking how we do these things is necessary if we're to help these people and to make sure that they get the treatment they need rather than leaving them by the wayside, which is too often the case today. We must remember, Mr. Speaker, that these people with mental illness often have very serious illnesses, and they don't have the aptitude or the mental capacity necessary to adapt to a prison setting. And yet we have closed down mental health care institutions for people who are suffering. And often these people don't have the resources necessary to even deal with life in society. So often they are isolated, put in isolation, and have to undergo other security measures in prison. And this is never a solution for people suffering from mental illness. When they get out of prison, these people find themselves with even worse mental health issues because their illness has not been managed. In some cases, it's gotten much worse. While the Conservatives emphasize harsher sentences, which only aggravate the situation, the NDP wants to put its emphasis on true solutions. This is why we care about helping people who have been found guilty and suffer from mental health in order to take advantage of the resources to support them in rehabilitating them and getting them back into society. We want them to have everything they need to become part of society again. Mr. Speaker, please allow me to salute the work, the amazing work and resilience of the various organizations in my riding of Saint-Hyacinthe-Bagat, organizations who fight to help people with mental health issues and their families. There's Le Phare, Atelier Transition, l'Auberge du Cœur, le Centre psychosocial Richelieu-Yamaska, le Centre des femmes, l'Automne en Soi, le Centre hébergement et réinsertion sociale, les centres de bénévolat, and other mental health institutions and services. Every day, these organizations work to help people in need, and they contribute to bettering the life of the entire community of Saint-Hyacinthe and Acton Vale. The organization Le Phare is one of these groups. Its mandate is to support people and their families, the families of people suffering from major mental illness. Saint-Hyacinthe and its region have the advantage of having the work of the Centre Psychologique Richelieu-Yamaska, which has as its mandate to help people dealing with mental health issues. It's because of organizations such as these that we're able to change things. I would hope that we'd be able to continue to help these people at the federal level. I'd like to mention another organization in my region. It's called Le Trait d'Union Montérégion, which is a community center, a nonprofit group that offers sponsorship service, helping to get adults re-enter society. Now, once one understands just how much support can help these people, you can see that an organization such as Le Trait d'Union Montérégion is essential for those people who haven't had the opportunity of benefiting from an enriching relationship with people around them. These organizations are a true advantage and a true blessing for people across Canada who are dealing with mental health. Nevertheless, I feel it's vital for the government to commit to a real initiative at the federal level, because the work of these organizations locally is not enough to change things. We need to work together with community workers, health professionals, frontline workers such as the RCMP and the provincial justice organizations in order to help these people. I would encourage the government to do this. Let me repeat, Mr. Speaker, the NDP will support this bill. Nevertheless, we feel that the government should do more to really try to end the overrepresentation in our prison system of people with mental illness. To our minds, amending the criminal code and introducing information concerning mental issues in pre-sentencing reports would be a good start, but it's still very insufficient with respect to our aim at truly changing things. These people need support from the federal government. I would encourage this government to put funding into helping these people to be more ambitious, and I would hope for this in 2018, but it seems that unfortunately we'll still have to wait. Resuming debate.
Secretary to the Minister of Justice.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je suis ici.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm here today to speak to Private Members Bill C-375, an act to amend the Criminal Code, pre-sentence reports.
We'll be supporting Bill C-375, and we commend the honourable member from Richmond Hill for his leadership and collaboration on the important issue of mental health in our criminal justice system. And just before I continue with the substance of my remarks, I was listening very carefully to some of the concerns expressed by my Conservative colleague from the riding of Durham, and I think it's important to address the thrust of it, and that is that this private member's bill is somehow vague. In fact, on our interpretation of this private member's bill, it serves to clarify and cure a vagueness which is currently within the code, the criminal code, in the sentencing process, by making an express reference to mental health concerns in the context of the criminal sentencing process. And what is important that my honourable colleague from across the aisle appreciates is that in that context, when we are talking about finding somebody not criminally responsible as a result of not having the mental capacity to appreciate the consequences of committing a criminal offence, that is a separate and distinct legal concept from the provisions under Section 718 and 721 of the Criminal Code, where after an accused individual pleads guilty and has accepted the responsibility for committing those offences, that in that context a judge would take into consideration mental health issues as part of the overall sentencing exercise, and I offer those comments in the spirit of constructive dialogue. So let me say to my honourable colleague from Richmond Hill that in the first hour of second reading of debate, the sponsor stated that his bill is intended to ensure that individuals with mental illness who find themselves in the criminal justice system are afforded the care, compassion, and appropriate treatment that they need during the process of their rehabilitation. Specifically, the bill aims to make the criminal justice system more responsive to individuals with mental health issues by amending Section 721 sub 3 of the Criminal Code to specify that a pre-sentence report must contain information regarding any mental disorder from which the offender suffers. Un rapport présententiel est une...
A pre-sentence report is a written document prepared by a probation officer to help the court learn more about the person to be sentenced. Its purpose is to assist the court in making the appropriate sentencing decision. These reports are intended to be an accurate, independent, and a balanced assessment of an offender, their background, and prospects for the future.
By judges these pre-sentence reports with a firm evidentiary basis on which to exercise their discretion at sentencing. When judges are given the necessary background and context about each unique set of circumstances, the result is a sentence that better protects the community, rehabilitates the offender, and ultimately reduces crime. Le Code criminel précise...
The Criminal Code currently outlines that certain information about the offender, including his or her age, maturity, character, behavior, attitude, and willingness to make amends, should be contained in a pre-sentence report.
The Youth Criminal Justice Act and the history of previous sentences and of findings of guilt. The history of alternative measures used to deal with the offender and the offender's response to those measures should similarly be contained in the report. Those measures may include judicial cautions or programs requiring community service or repairing harm done. However, the Criminal Code does not presently expressly require that information about the mental condition and as it relates to the offence of the offender must be included in the pre-sentence report. In my view, this is highly relevant information for a judge who is attempting to craft an appropriate sentence. Indeed, as we learn more and more about the role of mental health issues in contributing to criminal behaviour, the importance of considering this information at sentencing is beyond question. The impacts of mental illness are, of course, not limited to the criminal justice system, but are linked with much broader challenges being faced by our society as a whole. Today, mental health issues cost Canadians millions of dollars each year. As the sponsor has previously said, it is estimated that the total cost of mental health challenges exceeds $50 billion annually in healthcare expenses and lost productivity. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, in any given year, 1 in 5 people in Canada will personally experience a mental health problem or illness. These challenges are even more pronounced in the criminal justice system. While statistics are not as fulsome as we may like, there is evidence to suggest that in our penitentiaries, mental health issues are 2 to 3 times more prevalent than in the general population. The rates of mental illness among federal offenders has more than doubled in the last 20 years. In fact, individuals with mental illness are more likely to be arrested, detained, incarcerated, and consequently more likely to be disciplined rather than being treated. This is an ongoing issue, as once they have been released from the criminal justice system, they are also more likely to be rearrested and to reoffend. In other words, an offender whose mental illness is unrecognized and untreated is at far greater risk of being caught in the revolving door of incarceration and repeat offending.
That is why we need to continue to develop measures like the one proposed in Bill C-375 to address mental health in a proactive way. In particular, the bill will help to ensure that our judges are well equipped to assess the needs of those being sentenced and enable them to direct the offenders to proper rehabilitation. This ultimately will help to break the vicious cycle of criminality by addressing this issue at the outset.
Economic benefits of this smart and proactive approach to criminal justice can hardly be overstated. Under the prior government, we saw time and time again that a regressive approach to sentencing divides families and consumes financial resources that could be better used to improve the lives of Canadians and to keep all of them safe. Instead, by identifying and meeting the mental health needs of offenders in the short term, we can stop that revolving door of chronic reoffending and create a safer, more prosperous community for all. All of this begins by identifying the underlying problem, which is precisely what Bill C-375 works to ensure. Mr. Speaker, it appears to me that supporting this bill is consistent with a number of broader initiatives of our government which are aimed at supporting those mental health issues, and they go back to our prior budgets. In Budget 2018, we build on the investments made in past years, proposing an additional $20.4 million over 5 years, and beginning in 2018-19, that will be $5.6 million per year and ongoing. The funding is aligned with the recently announced investment of $5 billion over 10 years to improve mental health services across the country. Bill C-375 is also consistent with the mandate given by the Prime Minister to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General. In particular, she was directed to address gaps throughout the criminal justice system, and more particularly the gaps in services to those with mental illness. In my view, the measures proposed in Bill C-375 are consistent with that mandate and will serve to advance our government's broader plan to address the challenges related to mental health in Canada. Mr. Speaker, before concluding, I wish to draw to attention a few questions that I've identified with this bill. I'd like to think that these are issues which could be studied by the committee and possibly addressed through minor amendments. First, I note the bill focuses on the needs for a diagnosis of an offender and not on the symptoms or behaviours that manifest as a result of a mental health issue. In my view, it would be more useful to a sentencing judge to have broader information about the offender's mental health more generally rather than the official diagnosis. Secondly, I would note that the bill does not contain a link or a nexus between the mental health information that is sought and the purposes for which it will be used. For me, this raises some concerns that a sentencing court could be provided with mental health information which may not be directly relevant to the offence and therefore the sentencing process by extension. I trust that these are issues that the committee will address through its study. Finally, it seems to me that the language with respect to mental health, quote, programs could create some confusion as to what type of information should be provided to the court. In my view, it is unclear what is meant by the term programs, as mental health care is indeed a specific type of medical care, and not specifically delivered through programming. Once again, I expect that all these issues can be thoroughly addressed at committee. Mr. Speaker, I would once again like to thank the sponsor of this bill and commend him for his work, his commitment to mental health issues. I know that it comes from a place of great sincerity, authenticity. I look forward to supporting this private member's bill along with all members of this House. Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Resuming debate, reprise du débat. Resuming debate, reprise du débat. Right to reply, the honourable member for Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise once again to discuss my private member's bill, C-375. At the outset, I'd like to thank all members who have substantially contributed to the substance of this private member's bill. And I'd like to thank the members today for once again covering the scope and the intent of the bill. So I limit my remarks for the next 4 minutes into responding to some of the concern that was raised earlier as part of the first hour of debate. Mr. Speaker, I've been listening intently to those members who have spoken to the bill previously. While the debate has been spirited, I've been encouraged by its good faith and cooperative nature. This is, I think, in and of itself, an acknowledgement by all parties that there is a need for real change in the intersection between our justice system and mental health. I hope that C-375 can play a role in this change and inform future changes as governments of today and tomorrow navigate that dynamic relationship. If I could, Mr. Speaker, I would like to take some time to address the contradictions and inaccuracies raised by some of my colleagues across the aisle during the first hour of the debate. They've raised two concurrent concerns. One, that in cases where mental health information is relevant, judges already choose to include mental health information in pre-sentence reports. And two, that the process of mandating this information be provided where relevant would add a burden to the justice system. Mr. Speaker, I think that the contradiction here is very clear. If judges are already choosing to include this information in their pre-sentence report in all relevant cases, then we are simply codifying an existing practice. There can be no additional burden because this practice is already applied when relevant. And if this legislation would add a burden, then we must accept that the mental health information is in fact not being requested in all relevant cases. And while we are on the topic of additional burdens, Mr. Speaker, it is my understanding that a sentence imposed without reference to relevant available medical evidence is vulnerable to attack on appeal. Whatever hypothetical burden would be added to the justice system by adding additional information to pre-sentence report cannot possibly compare to the burden of time and cost that the judiciary is open to by vulnerable verdicts. In addition, more than one of my colleagues have suggested that providing mental health information in pre-sentence report would result in unfairness and inconsistency in the administration of justice, by which they must mean to say judges will make considered decisions based on information they would otherwise not have had. I would say, Mr. Speaker, that this is an intended feature, not an bug. I trust our judiciary. I consider them credible decision makers, and I trust them that they will not become, as I quoted, confused when provided with additional context. But for judges to make an informed consideration, they must have all the facts. Mental health is an ongoing project, a frontier of medical and social science. Even those at the forefront of their field continue to make new discoveries and find new connection and context. As such, judges must be provided with all information whenever possible, so as not to prejudge an offender before they have all the facts. In this constantly changing field, what may or may not be pertinent is in flux, and it's unreasonable to expect every judge to take full account of relevant mental health information in the absence of the facts and context contained in the pre-sentence report. There have also been colleagues who have suggested that this bill does not go far enough. Mr. Speaker, I agree. In drafting legislation, particularly private member bills, there may be tendency to err on the side of caution. To narrow the scope, one must consider the end result. I'm proud of the bill as it stands, but far be it from me to suggest that we cannot broaden its scope or clarify its existing intent. I believe that this House stands united in our belief that improvement can and must be made at the intersection of our sentencing progress and the lives in reality of these Canadians who have continued to struggle with mental health. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question is as follows. Mr. Jawari, seconded by Ms. Khalid, moved that Bill C-375, an act to amend the Criminal Code pre-sentence report, be now read a second time and referred to the Standing Committee on Justice and Human Rights. Is it the pleasure of the House to adopt the motion? Yes. All those in favour, please say yea. Yay. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. I believe the yeas have it. Pursuant to Standing Order 93, the recorded division stands deferred until Wednesday, March 21st, 2018, immediately before the time provided for private members' business. Okay. The House stands adjourned until Monday, March 19th, 2018 at 11 a.m., pursuant to Standing Order 28.2 and 24.1.